Okay, so it is 9:35. We're 5 minutes behind, so we're going to get started. First of all, thank you guys so much for coming out. This is our first time having one in person, so anybody that knows me or have worked with me know that I'm really like, but I'm very happy about the turnout, and NAMI just wants to say thank you so much for coming and support this important event. Just a few housekeeping rules. Your bathrooms are over here to your left. We have plenty of coffee and snacks if you want to get any. There's 2 garbage bins over there as well. Please try to keep everything neat. We want to make sure that they welcome us back next year when we come. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Scott, and he's going to give us our welcome. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Silek. I'm the Executive Director of the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board, and thank you for coming out today. It's a wonderful event. As you know, it's the 7th Annual Latino Leadership Initiative Forum, put on by NAMI of Greater Toledo. And I must also thank our speaker today, Mr. Louis Guardiola, for the work he's going to do today and sharing his wisdom. And of course, all the other panelists that are here today. They have spent years dedicating their life to improving the Latino community, and their dedication to the effort and to the citizens of Lucas County are unparalleled. So we really do appreciate all their efforts. And of course, we appreciate all your efforts as well for being here today, showing the insight and the motivation to come here on a Tuesday morning to learn about what can be done in our community, how to negotiate the system, and how to take care of yourselves a little bit as well. So just one other note, this could not be done without the support of the residents of Lucas County and taxpayers like yourself. The Mental Health and Recovery Services Board provides funding for these initiatives, and we are truly inspired every time we make our way to these events and see the great support. So without further ado, I will welcome Miss Aaliyah Jones, to the stage here, and appreciate all your efforts and enjoy the remainder of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Hello again to everyone. My name is Aaliyah Jones. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Associate Director of the Office of Multicultural Student Success at the University of Toledo, and it is my distinct pleasure and honor to be with you here this morning and to serve on the committee that puts on today's event. So thank you so much. So I have the pleasure of welcoming you all to this space to welcome and thank you for helping celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month with us. Let's give it up for Hispanic Heritage Month. Yes. Yes. Thank you, Vicente. It's Hispanic Heritage Month. It's a time to celebrate our people, our culture, and what a beautiful space that we're able to do that in. So thank you all for being here at the Sophia Quintero Art and Cultural Center. If you've never been here before, this is a wonderful space that is open and available to the community to host events. They have some awesome programming, one of which I will tell you about in a second here. But if you are someone who's interested in learning more about especially art and culture in the Latino community, this is a great resource and agency for you to get connected with, and many of your clients, you can refer them here to the awesome things that they do that is for the entire family. So wanted to give a plug, of course, for SWAC for hosting us this morning. I did want to just thank you all for being a part of this event. You know, as you all know, mental health is such a critical issue right now. I see it every single day with our college students, and we know that cultural competency is so important when we are serving folks and helping them become better versions of themselves. So the fact that you all have taken the time out of your very busy schedules to be here to learn more, to help our people, I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Next, I did want to just talk about a couple upcoming events within the community that we would love to invite all of you to attend. I do have a cheat sheet here that I wrote down. There are a couple of things actually happening this week that we would love for you to be involved in and help us celebrate. So I do have to put a plug in for the University of Toledo. We are celebrating our sesquicentennial, which is 150 years of the university this year. So hopefully you all have seen that we are having a huge event tomorrow evening starting at 5, which includes a huge concert, and T-Pain is our headliner. So we're really excited about it, yes. So 5 o'clock, we did just announce that it is going to be moved inside, so it will be taking place in Savage Arena. So I hope that you will all come out and join us for that event. It is free, open to the public. Invite your primos, invite your cousins, invite your aunts, uncles, your family members, your friends. Please, it's going to be a huge time. You'll find me volunteering at the beer tent, so I would love to see you at that event tomorrow. This Thursday, and actually let me take a minute to again recognize Mr. Louis Guardiola, who is a recipient this year of the Adult Professional Diamante Award. So let's give it up for Louis. This is, yes, our first announcement to the community. So now, yes, Louis, you can post it on all of your social media and let the people know that for literally decades of service, Louis is being recognized by the Latino community at a special event, the Diamante Awards, which is hosted by the Latino Alliance of Northwest Ohio, and in collaboration with the 4 local institutions of higher education, where we recognize scholarship recipients at all 4 of the schools, as well as our Diamante Award recipients. So Louis is our Adult Professional Award recipient this year, so we're very excited, very honored to have him finally be recognized. And so that event is this Thursday, the 13th at 6 p.m., and this year it's being hosted at Bowling Green State University. If anyone is interested in attending, you can come and speak with me. I may be able to get you a ticket or give you more information about being at the event. So that is awesome, and we're really excited to recognize Louis. I did want to, of course, plug NAMI's awesome event coming up at the end of this month on Friday the 28th from 3 to 6. The Bootyful Halloween Evening with NAMI. So if you have not seen this yet, please make sure to visit our tables in the back. NAMI here has some awesome stuff. The Mental Health Board has some awesome resources for you all. But 3 to 6 at their new location on Secor, which is 4334 Secor Road. This is open to the community, and we would love to have folks attend and be festive. Costumes are welcome. And then I did want to also mention the event that Squawk hosts annually. It's their largest fundraiser and really one of the best events in the city, if I do say so myself, where we celebrate Day of the Dead, or Dia de los Muertos. So many people are now more familiar with Day of the Dead due to some, cultural things. Coco the movie has really brought Day of the Dead to a very large audience. But if you would like to learn more about a traditional celebration, what it means, our reverence to folks who have passed on, and to see some very beautiful displays. So we have the space here, the event center, but across the street for Squawk is the gallery. So that space will host many ofrendas, or offerings for folks for Day of the Dead. So that is actually going to be a 3-day event this year on November 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And Squawk, squacc.org is where you can get more information about those events, okay? But if any of those things you would like to learn more about, you're welcome to find me anytime today, and I would be happy to talk with you more about them. Okay, so moving on to the next part of our agenda here. I also have the distinct honor of welcoming and introducing our speaker and our moderator for this afternoon's panel, Ursula Barrera Richards, who is right here. And please give it up for Ursula. My friend and fashion icon, of course, as you will see today. But Ursula serves as the Chief Human Resources for the ZEF Center. And she served as a Human Resources Director for the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services at NOPH before coming to ZEF. So many folks in the community know and love Ursula for her time that she has served working in the mental health field. With 17 years of public sector experience, Ms. Beretta Richards is a passionate strategic change agent with the goal of elevating organizations and cultures. She specializes in public sector labor relations and creating innovative ways to solve problems by employing her legal, public relations, public policy, and human resource expertise. I didn't mention this, but Ursula does have her JD, so give it up for her. Prior to joining NOPH as the HR director, Ursula served as the HR and Labor Relations Director for Lucas County Auditor's Office, overseeing HR operations, as well as contract negotiations for 3 union contracts. She began her career as a congressional aide to the Honorable Marcy Kaptur in Washington, D.C. Prior to returning to Toledo in 2011, she worked in various capacities for the state of Ohio, including the Ohio legislature as an aide to Senator Teresa Fetter, where she was instrumental in crafting, drafting, and building networks to support SB 235, which is legislation making human trafficking a standalone felony. I think she deserves a round of applause for her work in that. Ms. Barrera Richards studied labor policy at the Cornell Institute for Public Affairs and went on to serve clerkships at the United Auto Workers International Union in Detroit and the Ohio State Troopers Union in Columbus, Ohio. After graduating from the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law, she served a clerkship at the Ohio Attorney General's Office in the Employment Law section. Ms. Barrera Richards, a Toledo Public School graduate of Bowser High School, received her undergraduate education at the University of Toledo on a Toledo Excel scholarship. She resides in South Toledo with her 2 small children. Please thank and welcome Ursula Barrera Richards. I don't think so. I think next is actually Louise coming up, right? Oh, you are up. Yes.
We didn't practice this. Well, thank you all. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Louis Guardiola, who is one of my mentors in town. Ever since we started the Latino Mental Health Forum, this has been such a joy every year. With those few years that we had to take a break for COVID, so that was very unfortunate, but we're back at it. So thank you, NAMI, for organizing this. Louis is such a joy to work with. I think everybody can agree who has the pleasure of working with him. And this is such a wonderful thing to bring to the community. So for all the clinicians out there and those who are patient-facing, thank you for taking the time to do this, because building your cultural competency is one of the most important things you can do for our community and for your patients and for your clients. So thank you all for taking the time to do this. And did anybody talk about the CEUs yet? Okay, so there's CEUs. For those of you who are licensed, up at the front we have a sign-in sheet, so please leave your license number. You do have to stay for the whole time. You have to sign in and sign out in order to get your CEUs, and Vet Center will be processing those today. And we have CEUs for licensed social workers and LPCs. I think, Robert, do you remember what else? I think just those 2 this year. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Louis, who I think needs no introduction, but we'll just go ahead and do it anyway. Okay, so Mr. Louis Guardiola, it's a lot of letters here, Louis. MSW, LICDC/CS, LSW, earned his MSW from Cleveland State University in Cleveland, Ohio in 1998. He joined the social work program at the University of Toledo as the MSW field director in 2014. In 2018, he was appointed as the assistant dean for diversity and inclusion for the College of Health and Human Services. He has over 30 years in the practice of behavioral health and holds professional licenses in social work and chemical dependency. His primary research practice includes cross-cultural communications, Latino, Hispanic mental health and health issues, macro social work practice. His recent research projects include comparing coping strategies and resiliency among Korean War and OEF veterans, recognizing and overcoming barriers to cross-cultural communication, cross-cultural examination and utilization of hospice care in Northwest Ohio, and engaging language professionals for patient-centered outcomes research with Latino communities. He teaches advanced field experience. He has an extensive background as a diversity and inclusion trainer in healthcare, academia, and the nonprofit sector. And I can also add that he is responsible for placing a lot of clinicians in community behavioral health. So that's something you don't tout enough here, Louis. So thank you very much for doing that. So we'll go ahead and give a warm welcome to Louis.
Who is this Louis guy that everybody keeps talking about? Hopefully he asked for a good per diem or what, honorarium or whatever they call it. Good morning, welcome. A couple things, Hispanic Heritage Month, so we got that going on. It's National Coming Out, as my colleague Sherry reminded me, National Coming Out Day today. So that's important for folks that are also marginalized in that community and our struggles, etc. And the LGBTQ Awareness Month for the month of October. Am I missing anything? It's good that we're recognizing all this diversity, that we're recognizing that we come from all different backgrounds. You heard a little bit about mine. The clip that was played earlier was probably the most disclosure I've had about who I am, which is interesting because culturally we, or at least I was brought up that you're humble, you don't talk about yourself, and so when I was being asked these things by the wonderful Tiffany Harpley, she did a wonderful job during the interview. We interviewed across the street at the Galeria. I thought that it could be open for us to walk over during breaks, but unfortunately they're getting ready for Dia de los Muertos. So, but come back to South Toledo. Participate in a lot of the wonderful restaurants that they have here locally. As you know, because it was said that I have over 30 years of experience, so I'm old. I have a few people as I'm coming back to this area when I did the study for the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board that I'll talk in my presentation. It was really wonderful to come back to an area that I had worked in 1983 to 84. I'm looking at Betty because Betty Anzaldua used to be my boss at the Guadalupe Family Health Center when I was a social worker assistant working with the wonderful Marta Delgado, who was my first MSW person that I met, who was Latina and was an inspiration and my mentor for many years as I was going into the field of social work. So I did a lot of things in the community. We had the clinic at the Aurora Gonzalez Center. At that time, Judge Flores was running for office back then. I remember that was when they allowed you to register people to vote, and they gave you like $1 for each card or whatever. That you guys remember that? Many, many years ago. So I worked on his campaign in registering voters, and obviously he was a wonderful asset to the community. I knew Sofia Quintero. She was very involved with METRA at the University of Toledo. Wonderful person, her husband Arturo. So all these memories, all these things that I have that made who I am, in addition to growing up in my family system, who added who I am as a person, personally and professionally. And again, so there'll be some let's talk about social work. There'll be some, my students are here, purposeful disclosure in terms of what about who I am, to help you understand some of the experiences that people that may look like me will have as you deal with that when you work with them in the community as social workers, as helpers, as community advocates, as community organizers, and working in the community. I'm from Fremont, Ohio. Toledo's kind of like, I consider like we're a suburb of Toledo. Initially, we would come to Toledo, the Hispanic community would come to Toledo for the bailes that were held at the sports arena, for El Rancho, which is right outside Toledo near Genoa. So this is where the Latino community would come to shop, to socialize, to come to the mercados, to go to the places, to the panaderias, the bakeries, etc. So this was kind of like where we would come from the country, I guess, to come and socialize and be part of the network. So regardless of demographics, we're familia. We are family, and we support each other, especially during the time I'm talking about the 60s, in the 50s, there was a lot of overt discrimination, and So the communities had to connect. They had to support each other. Additionally, the community was Spanish speaking. And so there was a need for networking and having extended systems to interpret. So when you went to the store, predominantly English was being used. So folks had to draw upon those natural support systems to get them through and navigate the messiness of life, right? As our theme this morning is, and the panel will go in deeper in terms of their experiences, et cetera. I guess when I did the interview for WTOL, I was like the local expert. I don't know what that means, a local expert, but I humbly will provide you with my experiences as a Latino and as a social worker, having worked within the community. I am bilingual. It's starting to fade a little bit because I don't practice it enough. I haven't been to Puerto Rico as much as I'd like to in terms of doing some accreditation studies, so I usually get some practice there. So I think that the challenges that we're going to talk about, the tips that I'll give for you all who are working with Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, and I'm going to talk about this in my presentation about all these different terms. So I'm going to start a little bit with, in the beginning, talking about Latino 101, kind of giving you a little bit of update of what that looks like, statistics both nationally and locally, and then I'm going to go into the different techniques and tips and things of when you're working with people. And I think a lot of the things that I'll be talking about you can translate to working with other cultures, especially cultures that have other languages, right? So I'm talking about Spanish, but there's other languages that of the communities that are diverse here in Lucas County. And then I'm going to go into the research that I did with my colleague Arturo Ordonez, who's there. Over the summer, the Mental Health Recovery Services Board reached out to me to ask about looking at how to address the gap when Adelante decided to stop serving the community, and so I did that, and so I'll present the data and go into a little deeper in terms of what that is and the next steps of what the Mental Health and Recovery Services is going to do. I don't know, Scott, will you be here later this afternoon? Okay, so maybe would you be okay to talk a little, just mention a little bit about the... Whatever you need to do. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So as Mr. Guardiola mentioned, Kevin, you want me to go up there? Or are we good here? Yes, please. All right. As Mr. Guardiola mentioned, we reached out to him early in summer to ask him to do a stakeholder needs assessment. He's going to talk a little bit about that in preparation to do a request for proposal for behavioral health navigator, bilingual, bicultural behavioral health navigator, and school and community-based prevention services. Last month, our board decided to authorize that RFP process based on the findings of the stakeholder survey. They essentially tripled the amount of funds that were previously available for those services. From about 170,000 to 500,000 annually, and what we're hoping to do is release that by the end of the month. We plan to release it in both English and Spanish, and we are forming our committee now. We hope to have the responses back by December 9th. We'll take through the Christmas time to score those RFPs, and then we will make recommendation to my board in the beginning of January in relation to who the selected vendor is, negotiate the contract through the month of January, and hopefully have a contract in place as of February 1 for services to begin. So that's the plan. Of course, that is always subject to unforeseen environmental factors, but we hope to have our scoring committee in place by the end of the month, and we are certainly reaching out to several community members, in which Mr. Guardiola is one, to participate on on that committee. So appreciate the time to just plug that for a second, Louis, and you feel free to present any additional information that we've talked about.
Thank you, sir. So clearly in this count and measure society that we live in, the data, the research that Arturo and I conducted over the summer was helpful to the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board in seeing the gaps that were coming directly from the stakeholders, saying that there were issues related to or I shouldn't say issues, challenges and related to working with the Latino community culturally and linguistically in terms of language barriers. I'm having a little bit of anxiety because my PowerPoint is not working, so I'm going to have to try to, we're rebooting, so hopefully that'll come up here in a little bit. So anyhow, what I wanted to do is initially start talking about the Latino community, Latino 101. So you hear a lot, so we use Hispanic, we use Latino, Latina, then we've used the newest term, which is Latinx, and in terms of describing our population. There is no right or wrong term. I think that individuals will gravitate. It seems like the Latinx terminology, which is trying to address the issue of pronouns, trying to move away from gender, trying to move towards gender-neutral terminology. But there was a recent study done that only 2%, 3% of Latinos actually use Latinx. So it's used, but it's not used within the Latino community in terms of terminology. And part of that is some folks believe that it's a little bit of changing our language, right, our Spanish language, and so they feel that that is not something they want to see happen. And so, but you can use whichever term folks feel comfortable. It's a little challenging for me in terms of trying to develop the PowerPoints and develop, because I got to keep going back and forth between Latinx and Latino. I come from, as you know, 30 years of experience, so kind of figure that out in your head. So I am the older generation of Latinos in the community, so I tend to use Latino, Latina, and Hispanic. So it's not intended to minimize any other term. It's just something that I feel comfortable with. It's something that I have been accustomed to, but just being aware of, if you work with a person that is of Latino, Latina, Hispanic descent, and you use Latinx, and they're older, or they're just coming from Texas or migrating from that area, they may not know what that means. So I think that's part of the importance as clinicians, is that we need to be aware of doing a culturological assessment with our clients, asking them. They'll tell you the story. They'll let you know. But clearly you have to look at how you're going to engage with them, right? Engaging with them, recognizing them as individuals, and then you'll create that alliance, you'll create that connection with that client system, and then they'll be able to tell you the story, because you have developed trust, confianza, with that population, and that's so important. Because think of it, I mean, we don't just go to a doctor and just tell everything, you know. It takes some time. We want to establish rapport, and that's very, very similar to the working with Latino and Latinas. And then you have another issue, which is what would possibly be another challenge when working with the population in terms of engagement. Language barriers. So then you've got to make an assessment of whether or not that individual may need someone to translate for them, and who is going to do that, right? And you have to make that assessment. It's not appropriate for a child of the family member to be the one translating for their parent. And so, you know, there's rules, and that's a whole other in-service, which is, you know, who you're getting funding from and what is required from you when you receive federal funds, and what you're required to have as an agency in preparation for those instances where you have a non-English speaker. What could be some other barriers in terms of when you're working with oh, thank God. I think I did okay though. What are other barriers that you can think of when working with a Latinx client? This is kind of a pre-test. I'm a professor, right? So this is a pre-test, and then I'll give you all the information, and then we'll do a post-test, because we're all going to celebrate that you're a little bit more insightful in working with the population. Transportation, very good, and that's something that's going to come out in the study that I did locally here. What other issues? Yes? Resources, exactly, because there's maybe limited resources and challenges. Yes? Stigma, very good, awesome. Yes? Status, yes. The immigration status, working with people that may be undocumented, that have come here for a better life, that have come here to reunite with family members who may be documented, right? And all that fear and anxiety, etc., that comes with that. And then now, take a moment and think of, let's say we just transport this entire room to another country that speaks another language, is a different culture. And you have, let's say we're in Germany, or we're in, oh, maybe nicer, Cancun. No. Think about that we're in Cancun, and you have a mental health crisis, you have a situation, and you're going to go seek services, but you only speak English, and the outside world is Spanish speaking only. Can you think of how stressful that is? Being able to share with someone who doesn't speak your language? I don't know if you've all ever had that experience when you've been on a trip and might have had a crisis, so that's exactly what this community here is dealing with, that we have here in Lucas County. I'm going to talk a little bit about the statistics of the numbers of folks that are here in Ohio, nationally and locally, but it's probably a little bit higher because there's undocumented Latinos in the community that are fearful of recognizing themselves because of possible discrimination, deportation, etc. So these are the things that these clients are going to come to you with, all this institutional racism experience, that then are going to be vulnerable to someone who they may not know whether or not they're going to report them or give them a medication or provide a service, and they don't understand what that is about. But yet they're supposed to confide in you to have that intervention done. So those are the things that I think that are so important in trying to work with people who are different than your culture, different in terms of language, that we need to be aware of. So I kind of referred to the different terminology. So the Latinx population, we are at close to a little over 62 million. So we're the largest minority in the United States. I believe it occurred in around 2003 was when our numbers surpassed the African American community, who is now the second largest minority population. So this in nationally 2020, so close to 62 million identified. So that was up from 57 million in 2010. So we're growing, and that's probably not an accurate number because it doesn't take into account undocumented individuals that may be residing in the U.S. And when we look at that number, we're the most youthful minority population, meaning that our numbers are higher in the lower ranges of adolescents, children, etc. So we're the most youthful population. So for those of you, so those of us, because I'll include myself, that are getting to the point where we're going to maybe need some caregiving, it's pretty much going to be people that look like me that are going to be caregiving you as our population increases. So I think that's interesting. So the data within Ohio, the largest county is Lorain, and Lorain is a little different in terms of diversity when you look at the other 9. Lorraine has a large population of Puerto Rican individuals. So they have more Puerto Ricans than they do Mexican individuals. The Defiance and Dusty counties where I'm from, we're the largest minority in our county, and we're at 10.3%. If you look at some of the Sandusky, Fulton, Henry, these areas are predominantly agricultural areas. So the families that would migrate from Mexico, Texas, etc., settled in the 40s, 50s, and 60s into these areas. And that's where Sandusky County also has the stoop labor, the agricultural labor that came in to fill the gaps for the farmers, etc., that were in that area. And then we have Lucas County at 7.5%, and that has been steadily increasing. I remember when I was working for the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board back in 1994, it was around 3.5%, I believe it was. So the population has been increasing. So what is the difference between Hispanic and Latino? This is what I was referring a little bit, but a lot of folks, they tend to refer themselves as Hispanic or Latino, or usually they refer to them as I'm Mexican, or I'm Puerto Rican, or I'm from Ecuador. So country of origin is 47% of people that they identify as their county, and then 30 as their country, and then 39% use Hispanic or Latino, and then only 14% refer to themselves as American. 54% have no preference. So again, the diversity of, even within our diverse culture, right? You know, just mentioned several. So those are the things that we need to be aware of, because there may be some local things or ethnic specifically things that Puerto Rican populations may have that may not be translatable to working with Mexican Americans. So those are things to be aware of as a clinician. And this is what I was referring to earlier, is what is Latinx? So if you look at the diagram, 76% of the people who were researched in 2021, because this is a fairly new terminology that was introduced, 76% of Hispanic Latinos had not heard of the term Latinx. And then 20% do not use it, and only 3% actually use the term. Latino, Latinas actually refer to themselves as Latinx. And so there's some organizations like the National Council of La Raza, I believe, that don't even use Latinx in their reporting and in their communication. They continue to use Latino, Latina. Any thoughts about that? Yes. Okay. So your experience has been with younger adults using that terminology.
I was going to agree with it. That I think it's a younger adult thing, and usually they're not first generation. They're usually like second, third generation that are here in this country, and so they identify with it. They're usually a little bit more educated, and going to school, or they're trying to be a little bit more of a political, and so they're kind of also too really into pronouns and all of that. So they understand that because they're seeing it all the time.
Right. Very good. And I want this to be a dialogue this morning because I am not the even though expert. I have knowledge based on my worldview and my experiences and my education, but things change, and I'm open, and I think we should all be open to hear other perceptions about things, and that's how we move together in terms of being accepting and have a sense of belonging for all of us. One thing that I noticed in terms of the term Latinx is that it's usually the youth population, younger population, And it's my experience has been people that don't speak Spanish. So that's interesting. Just food for thought. Yes.
What Shante said here, I work for Latino company that is found in California, and they all use pronouns. They are all young, and most of them are educated. But most of this group speaks Spanish, and they are all from Fresno.
Ah,
So
okay.
maybe it's the location.
Might be their demographics. But again, such wonderful diversity, right? That people can use and be who they are and use terminology. I think it's important to respect that, right? To respect it, that that's the term that they use, and not try to categorize, oh, that's not the term you should be using. Because I think it gets into that political piece, right? And we don't want that. We want people to be able to identify how they want to be identified. And in the case for me this morning, I'm not being disrespectful of anyone who uses and is drawn to that term, but also respect my being older and being much more accustomed to using the terminology that of Latino and Latina. The Pew Research did a study as well. In California, generally, so this is interesting. In California, generally, the term Latino and Latina are most common in the East Coast. Texas, New Mexico, Hispanic is more commonly used. And people or audiences themselves are much less concerned about these labels and most likely identify with their country of origin. So I am Mexican, I am Puerto Rican, I am Cuban, etc. Again, 76% of adults have not heard the term Latinx. Again, the diversity within our culture. We come from different shades, different hair textures. You know, you could be speaking to my parents, my mother, her family, my maternal grandparents. My maternal grandmother was, her parents were from Spain. So my great grandmother was blondish hair with green eyes. So I have cousins who have green and blue eyes that are very light complected. My mother was very light complected with freckles. And then on my dad's side, very indigenous Indian, very darker skin. And so again, that's that richness and that mixture of the indigenous Indian with the European. I always say that I struggle, especially with things like this, because the European, which is the Spain, right? Very European, very count and measure. And then the indigenous Indian that's more humble, that lets things grow and lets things be what they are versus the European culture that's like a cemetery. Everything has to be in order, right? It just has to be in order because that's the way it needs to be. So I struggle with, okay, I got to do PowerPoints because everybody wants PowerPoints and they're going to leave. But I'm thinking, well, they'll probably forget about the PowerPoint, so it's more important about the personalismo, the personal connection of the talk. So those are the things that I struggle with as a Latino, is that the very European part of me, the Spaniard part of me, and the indigenous Indian part of me. So we come from different textures, different skin colors. But in this study that was done by the Pew Research Center, is 8 in 10 Latinos selected one of the 4 lightest skin colors, with the second lightest ranking most common at 28%, followed by the third 21%, and the fourth lightest color at 17%. By contrast, only 3% of Latino respondents selected one of the 4 darkest skin colors. Thoughts on that? Any thoughts of why? This is a Latino self-identification of skin tone. That what they felt their skin color was. Oh, thank you.
And it was done in this area.
It's done by the Pew Research Center, so they just randomly selected Latinos to participate in this study of selecting which skin tone do they feel best represents them.
Okay. Well, initially when I read this, I thought it was like they were describing what they feel the overall Latino color is, and then I was gonna speak on the ignorance how Latinos can be evolved skin color,
Right.
whether it's super light
Okay.
or super darkest. But if they're identifying their own, then I think that speaks on like the like I guess the general skin color within the area of what we may have. Maybe that'll show some insight on whether we have more Puerto Ricans or Mexicans or other kind of Latinos. So
Okay.
that's my thought. I don't know.
No, that's it. Anybody else have any thoughts? Yes. Yeah, what they felt comfortable with in terms of how they identify as their skin color. Lighter skin. They were drawn towards identifying themselves as lighter skin tone. Yes. Go ahead. Dr. Dole. Good question. Why would they? Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I get a lot of videos about race issues, and then I get a lot of videos about how Afro-descendants feel a lot of erasure of the community. I get a lot, especially when it comes to our looks and our beauty ideals, and also has to do with colorism. I get a lot of videos about race issues, and I've gotten many about Afro, Latino, and Latino erasure. They just feel like they're not commonly identified as a part of the Latino community naturally without having to speak up and say, actually I am, actually I do speak Spanish, actually I'm from a Latin American community. So that's what I've heard.
So what she's referring to is Afro-Latino individuals and being identified as Latino and being seen more as black and not they're part of their heritage that's Latinx. Like Celia Cruz and those individuals who are Spanish speaking. Yes.
I would also, I mean, I agree with the colorism, which is like an internalized kind of oppression, but also the external oppression, like I'd be interested to know who Pew had access to, because in oppression, you know, you don't have those livable wage jobs, you're not as visible in society, so, you know, the lighter skin color you are, the more access you have to goods and services, which means you have more access to the survey and the people at Pew. So I don't know if it's just internalized or if it's like they didn't have access as much to this study, perhaps.
Yeah, again, we take studies with a grain of salt because number one, like when I was in school in the 90s, all the stuff that I read about was, when I was in graduate school in 1996, 1998, was pretty much about African Americans. When they talked about race, it's usually white and African American, white and African American. So I said to my professor, well, what about me? What about folks, what about Latinos? And he said, well, when you get your MSW and your PhD, then you'll be doing the studies on that population for us, which I thought was a cop-out.
Real quick, before you move forward, when we did the review on this under the color, as far as the rules federally on the allotments of the quadrant, which is under that color, the rule of law of the red, white, black, and yellow. As simple as that when you go back to common law. We as indigenous nations have argued that for years.
Yeah, you know, I think that again, it's labels. I mean, we need to be careful and cautious with labels, but I think that one of the things that was talked about in this research is that most Latino adults say skin color shapes their daily life experiences at least somewhat. Most say that having darker skin color hurts Latinos' ability to get ahead in the United States, so 62% felt that way, while having a lighter skin helps Latinos get ahead at 59%. So again, it's that, again, we're deferring to the larger society, right? And minimizing who we are, loving our Afro background in terms of, you know, being darker skin, having skin texture that's different. And so we minimize those things and we're ashamed of those things because we need to be able to fit in. I remember that my grandmother and my mother were talking about that they would have the when they first arrived in Ohio, they would send the family member who had the lightest skin that could pass to go to the store, to go to the bank, because they would get less resistance from society or the help, the people that they were reaching out to, because they tended to discount, they tended to not even recognize. So they would be serving everybody else except the person that was looked like myself versus someone who was lighter skinned.
Yeah, I'm also curious too about more current time, political rank or divisiveness. Like, particularly when you hear more talk about the so-called border threat and things like that. If that would change a person's degree of self-reporting as well, based on the perceived hostility from other people.
Well, I think that we all have to protect ourselves, right, based on what's going on in the environment that we're going to be walking into. And I think clearly, there's a lot of overt racism now, especially with the whole issue of immigration and the border, et cetera. There are other studies that show that actually Mexican-born people that are connected to the Mexican culture have a higher self-esteem than Mexicans who were born and raised here in the United States. And it's because, well, what do you think that would be the reason? Why would Mexican individuals who are more connected to Mexico or are Mexican have a higher self-esteem than Mexicans who were born and raised in the United States? Yes. So what she shared was that the connectedness to the culture, having easy accessibility. So you probably see that around the Rio Grande, the lower areas of Texas, the California. Very good.
I think that it all tends to do with your identity. So a lot of people, if you're second, third generation Mexican American, the Mexican people will tell you, well, you're not really Mexican. And you'll get a lot of that. And then also too, other people will look at you and like, well, you're not really American, you're Mexican. So you're kind of lost where you're actually at. So you have to find a community that supports you and lets you fit in.
Very good. Wonderful comments. I think there was a clip in the movie Selena. I don't know if anybody's seen Selena back in whatever. There was a clip where they were driving to go, she was debating about how because they didn't speak Spanish. They had to learn it, Selena and her family. So when they were going to move into, when they were going to perform in Mexico, the dad, Edward James Olmos, made a comment. He said, we're not Mexican enough for the Mexicans, and we're not white enough for the Americans. So that duality, that stressor of having to conform to what society expects us to be can impact our self-esteem, right? Because we don't have identification. We can't identify. We're not connected, and we're not accepted in Mexico. We're not. And the clip where I did for the WTOL 1011, I said, when that gentleman said to me, well, we moved from Gibsonburg when we were extended family system, and Gibsonburg had more Hispanics in the town, no African Americans, just Hispanics and whites. And then we moved from Gibsonburg to Fremont, who was a little bit more diverse, and in a neighborhood, right? We had a nuclear home, so we went from extended family to nuclear. And the neighbor, who was an older Caucasian gentleman, said to my brothers and myself, well, you need to just go back to Mexico. So clearly we were invading the neighborhood, right? Because we're Mexicans and adding a little color to the neighborhood. But he said to go back to Mexico. And my thing in this clip was, well, I've never been to Mexico. I mean, I was there as a kid to visit, but I don't know. If I was there, I probably would be like, oh, they're just, there's this gringo Mexicano coming in to visit. So I think that, and I didn't say this in the clip, but what my brothers and I said to this gentleman was, we're going to get our grandpa and he's going to beat you up. You know, fight or flight. And then we ran. Dr. Dawson, you had a question?
It was just on the kind of the horrors of colorism that doesn't just exist in the Hispanic community. That's a worldwide phenomenon, right? Where discrimination based on not being white enough, it happens. I mean, that happens within the African American community. If you go to India, which has 1.4 billion people in it, you see billboards for whitening cream, which is very popular. So, you know, Indians trying to make their skin whiter because they feel their lives will be better because of it. So this is a really, you know, destructive, colorism is a destructive force around the world.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that goes hand in hand with even you know, we see white as being accepting and pure, and you think darker is more evil or more. So you have those the duality of that. If you look at if you watch the telenovelas on the television and those, it really is prevalent in Mexico, because if you look at the actors, the main actors in the telenovelas are light skinned with blonde hair, with green eyes. They're the doñas and the dons. They're the owners. They're the main characters. They have the money. And then you look at the helpers, the limousine drivers, because all these are rich folks, and then they have drivers, and then they have people. They look like me, darker skin, dark hair, and then to add insult to injury, they speak the Spanish of the street Spanish, the grammatically incorrect, the sing-songy. So they even do the stereotypes from not skin color to even so there was a movement a little bit. Of course, you have to think about Mexico and its politics, but there was some movement to address those issues. It hasn't changed much, but again, it's that the wider you look, the more advantage you have, the more educated you are, etc. And these are telenovelas that our Mexican folks watch. So again, the media, I mean, we look at our own media here in the United States. There was a lot of discriminatory, stereotypical things, but those things, and even with the Chiapas and the Indians there, how Mexico was treating those indigenous Indians and marginalizing them, and these were our roots. This is where we came from, and so I think that those are the challenges, etc. So these are the individuals that are fleeing even some of those things and coming to the United States. And then being exposed to even more discrimination, more marginalization, being shipped to upstate New York, being, you know, all these things that they're having to have in terms of challenges. We mentioned Afro-Latinos, and so Afro-Latinos are about 2% of the United States adult population and 12% of the Latino adults. 1 in 7 do not identify themselves as Hispanic or Latino. So self-identity is 5.2, 8.8% million do not identify themselves as Hispanic. Again, it's how they feel comfortable, where they feel close to, and again, it's okay. I mean, but I think that it's important to realize that we come in different shades, that we come from different backgrounds that encompass the Latino population. Earlier, I think folks mentioned this. Mental illness is a stigma topic for Latinos. The Latinos tend to, depending on their, I'm using this term, I'm talking for folks regarding folks that have these challenges, but as a clinician, as a helper, I think it's important to ask the client, learn a little bit about them because you don't want to stereotype them as well, or you don't want to, you know, put them in a category that they don't feel comfortable. So for myself, I mean, I do identify as Latino, et cetera, but I've been so acculturated that some of my illnesses, some of my approaches to mental health may be more related to mainstream culture versus my Latino culture. Although, when things don't work out for me, when I've taken the medication, when I've done the things that I need to do and nothing works, I revert back to my cultural folk remedies for assistance. So it's very interesting, and I guess that's because I had that experience. But I would say my brothers and my sisters tend to be more assimilated, and they identify more into the mainstream culture. So because I grew up with my mom being someone that they would bring their, and I don't know if there's any medical people here, but my aunts and cousins and whatever in the family system would bring their babies to my mom when they were constipated. And my mom would put them on their back, and she would rub on them, and then she'd pull the skin that was right above the buttocks, and that was supposed to release and help. And so had that. My grandfather was did massages. So people would come to him when they had they stubbed their toe, their finger, whatever, and he would have his jar of lard. I remember as a little kid, he would have his can of lard, and then the people would come, and then they called it sovar massage, and then he would do that, and then he would pull out the whatever was going on with them, and so they would come there. My grandmother did lots with herbs, teas, different things certain teas that were for particular illnesses. So she would do that. So my mom would always send me go to grandma's and go get la hierba buena, go get this other stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then we do it, and it tasted awful. But I guess all medicine of the garden culture tastes awful. And so then, of course, some of you probably heard of the evil eye, right? And so it's a combination of Catholicism and the indigenous approach to healing. And so if someone gave you the evil eye, which is like this intense psychic attention, that they would make you sick. And nothing would, you take an aspirin and all that, none of that would work until they curad you de ojo, which is cure you from the evil eye. So you do that, you do the five apostle creeds, and brushing the egg around the individual, and then you break the egg and put it into a glass of water, and that egg is supposed to take in all the bad, all the negative energy into the egg, and then you get better. So I think that as helping people, we use what the individuals feel that is going to help them. So sometimes we have to use a combination of Western medicine and folk medicine. I don't like to call it non-traditional because it's traditional to the culture, right? So folk medicine, folk interventions. And these are the things that I grew up with, that I remember, but a younger Latino, Latina may not have had those experiences, so they're not as connected to that. So asking the individual, well, what do you think? So if someone comes to you, they have anxiety, they have depression or whatever's going on with them, asking them, what do they think caused it? It's a very simple question, right? Versus, oh, well, you have symptoms of depression and you need to be more effective coping skills, and if that doesn't work, we're going to send you to Dr. X, who's going to prescribe you with some antidepressants, and that's going to make you better. Okay. And the individual who's saying, I think it was my tia Juanita who is known for giving ojo, and she did this to me, and until I get that intervention, I'm going to continue to be sick. So, but as non-Latino or maybe this is a new cultural experience for you, you don't want to use one size fits all. You don't want to use that approach of, oh, there's a Latino, so they must believe in ovo, and we got to use that. No. You've got to work with the client, you've got to get their story, you've got to get what they feel is, what they think is their illness, and work with them on identifying an intervention that may be able to incorporate their cultural belief systems, as well as you ensuring that you're getting your productivity and your intervention that you have to do as a clinician. I remember once when I was working in psychiatry at St. Charles Hospital, we had an individual who was Latina and very, very spiritual, and she's Catholic. Well, she ended up on the psych unit because she became delusional about the Catholicism. So she was lighting like tons and tons of candles, and the house started on fire. And clearly, that was dangerous to herself. So she was admitted to psychiatry, and we were working with her. Of course, you can get her medication, so that she can stabilize her psychosis, etc. But she was still going to go back to those belief systems if we didn't address it. So I could address the medical part, we could address the Western intervention, getting them on medications, encouraging her to stop doing that, right? Stop it, don't do it anymore. But then she has this background of her Catholicism. So as a social worker, what do you think I did? You're working with a client, I gave you the scenario, met her where she's at, which would look like, what do you think could be some of the interventions? Okay. Prayer, okay, good. Anyone else?
Find out why she was lighting so many candles. What was that doing?
Okay. And we asked, they asked her that, and she said, because this is what God wants me to do, this is part of honoring, Our Lady of Guadalupe, et cetera, so she was doing that. What's that? A candle substitute, okay. That would be a great intervention, having them use those candles that just are light bulbs, right? Okay, to keep candles out of the house, but do you think that would be honoring her as an individual and her spirituality?
Well, maybe a way to without inviting, maybe manners of admission, keep that out of the house.
Very good. Again, trying to mitigate her getting hurt, right? Because if she likes too many, which she did. Yes?
Y'all hear me? But I said maximizing that's one of her strengths. So using, honoring and using Guadalupe and all the things that she believes and reframing and helping her turn that into a positive so that becomes a strength for her healing.
Very good. Yes. Trying to reframe, trying to use a strength-based approach.
Really, if I were the clinician in the situation, I would try to find out if she goes to church, and if she is active with a church, trying to get her priest or pastor, because I'm sure she would trust them and honor, follow them more than she would follow me, a stranger.
Very good, very good. So I think all these are wonderful comments. What I did was exactly that. Remember, I said St. Charles Hospital. So I don't know if they had them then, but back in the 90s, they had priests that were chaplains in the hospital. So I asked the father to come up and talk to the patient, and because the priest is what the conduit to God, right? That what the priest says is what God is saying. So I asked him to clearly explain the situation. He said, "Oh no, this is not good, right?" And so I asked him, "Okay, can you talk to her and give her permission that lighting one candle was enough?" And so he met with her and talked to her about that, and she said, "Oh, yes, Padre, is that, yes, okay, sí, Padre." So again, deferring to the cultural strengths, as Celia mentioned, trying to identify, and that was just one. I mean, you all mentioned a couple of different things that could have, that could work. Again, trying to combine the belief systems of spirituality with trying to help her with her mental health issues. And she never returned, so hopefully that worked, because clearly when they come in the hospital, then they get discharged. But she seemed to engage, she seemed to connect, and she accepted that the priest was there speaking in the authority of God that allows her to have that permission to only light one candle. I think that one of the issues, and we'll talk a little bit, how am I doing with time? Okay, so the issues related to Latinos, Latinas seeking mental health services has to do with systemic racism, institutional racism, and the lack of, you go to the clinic and you sit there for hours. I've heard this story, you sit there for hours waiting for them to get a hold of the person that's going to be the bilingual interpreter for the situation. While the family is poor, they have to go to work, they have child caregiving, etc. And so then they leave the clinic. In this case, the interview I had with this one client that was talking about the experiences, that's what happened. So they go in and they don't have the services that are needed, and that causes that barrier for them to get access to the treatment that they need. And so then you revert back to and you use the protective factors that help the individual maintain, or you use the folk medicine to try to, and again, it's opaque, but I think some of the things as we talk about, there may be some like schizophrenia, et cetera, that require medication to stabilize the individual, that not just praying over the individual and that is going to change it. The prayer is good in addition to the Western medicine if it's deemed appropriate. These are some statistics about prevalence of mental illness. Older adults and youth are more susceptible to mental stress related to immigration and acculturation. Again, the older adult trying to fit in with the world looks different, people don't speak my language, and the youth trying to go back and forth from their peers who are predominantly white, that have a different way of doing things, and then going back home where they're supposed to be respectful of the parents, and et cetera, et cetera. So that duality causes stressful situations for the client. When I was working in Wilmington, there was a DHL, which is delivery services like UPS, et cetera. They brought in a lot of Puerto Rican families, workers to work in DHL in Wilmington, and Wilmington's in southern Ohio, which is pretty much a little bit Appalachian, very Caucasian. And then I was working as a mental health director for a clinic there, and I was hearing these stories where these young Puerto Rican children were having issues at school and they were having issues at home. Well, come to find out that when they needed to have disciplinary problems or when they had work to do, they would be the ones that translated for their parents. So in one instance, these students were being equal with their parents because they were translating for whatever they needed. Of course, when they got a bad grade or they got in trouble, they didn't translate that as effectively and appropriately as they should have, which caused issues. So these kids were having to bounce back and forth from, if you look at Erickson's theories, right? What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to, well, here they were being put into situations where they were being adults, and so they started like, well, I can do what I want, right? Because they were given that permission based on their, the need for them to provide translation services for their parents. So we had to bring in the school system, we had to bring in everyone and talk about, we need to find another method to communicate with the parents so that we can reduce the acting out behavior that's going on at home. and ensure that the students can be kids. And so that is an example of that issue of why would kids have more stress, more acting out, more behavioral issues. According to SAMHSA, there's mental health issues on the rise for Latinx Hispanic people between the ages of 12 to 49. Serious mental illness, that would be schizophrenia, severe depression, etc., bipolar disorder, rose from 4% to 6.4% in Latinx Hispanic people ages 18 to 25, and 2.2% from 2.2% to 3.9% in 26 to 49 age range. So again, we're not free from being having the same issues of the stressors in our environment that are impacting our mental health, our well-being. Major depressive episodes in Latinx Hispanic communities from 2015 to 2018 increased again in the youth. They increased in young adults, and there was a slight increase in the 26 to 49 age group. Suicidal thoughts, plans, and attempts are rising among Hispanic young adults. 8.6% of Latinx Hispanics 18 to 25 had serious thoughts of suicide in 2018 compared to 7%, so a 1.6% increase. 3% made a plan compared to 2% in 2008. 2% made an attempt in 2018 compared to 1.6. So, you know, it's doubling and these are the reporting, so there's probably more of those that never got reported or didn't feel comfortable in reporting their suicide. Latinx Hispanic people are more likely to seek help for mental health disorders from a primary care provider than a mental health specialist. So I think that that's one of the important things about the interdisciplinary care that's going on, that the social determinants of health that you've been hearing. I think those things are important because Latinos tend to somaticize, we tend to make the physical illness of the mental health issue. So when people have maybe some onset of schizophrenia, psychosis, they always say, oh, tiene un ataque de nervios. They're having a nervous attack, versus that they're having a psychotic episode, because it's more accepting to have that than to say that there is a particular issue. Poor communication with healthcare providers is often an issue. There's a shortage of bilingual or Spanish-speaking mental health professionals. Bilingual patients are evaluated differently when evaluated in English versus Spanish, and Latinx Hispanic people are more frequently undertreated than whites. The language barrier results in misdiagnosis. So if you're not able to interact in their primary language, because there's something, sometimes I don't, not as much now, but earlier on, sometimes I would stop and say, well, how do you say it in English? I would know what to say, that feeling, that thought in Spanish, but I didn't know how to translate that into English. And I'm sure there's other folks that might speak another language other than Spanish that can relate to that, and off you're shaking your head.
Middle Eastern and North African community. Oh, gosh. They do.
Oh, this is about people feeling more comfortable. That you can't explain the feeling or the issue. Sometimes it's lost in translation.
Absolutely, yeah. So again, I will just give you an example. I do deal with the Indian refugees who mostly their mental illness affected by that they're coming from a war zone and they've been in third country before they come to this country, and they've been shocked with all the cultural differences and the language and all of that. So I do have a family, for example, that they're 5 people, and they do ask, which is unheard of in this community, to ask for mental health care. So they do ask, they need a care in that sense, but they don't want the translation. They say, we do not know how to explain. We don't want to be interrupted every few seconds, so somebody can deliver our message and explain our feelings. So they make it clear, and we are, I mean, the Latino community, they are way reached, yeah, milestone is, where you have accomplished a lot of researches and there is services and resources when we compare to the Middle East and North Africa. We still a baby steps in that field. So again, I 100% agree about people do not want translation, even with their own kids. They don't want somebody to play the role just, oh, I want to feel relief that I tell you what is my issue here. So I don't know if I could say my...
No, again, and hopefully that our communities, and I think that that's why this is so important, this is why NAMI does these events and works with the different populations in Lucas County, because there's a lot of things that we could teach each other in terms of protective factors, in terms of interventions that can be effective across cultures. And so that way that your community can learn from our wounds and our challenges, so that way you don't have to experience those in your communities. So I think that is so important. When Arturo and I were involved a couple years ago with Ohio State, we did a study looking at patient outcomes. So does the translation services provided to patients, do they have the modality? So if someone has telephonic or video or face-to-face, so those are the three modalities of translation. Are there different outcomes, health outcomes, positive health outcomes when you use those modalities? Clearly the face-to-face one outshine the others, that the outcomes, health outcomes are higher when the individual is face-to-face with the healthcare provider doing the translation. Again, because it encompasses that therapeutic alliance, it encompasses that connection and engaging, that sometimes it's more challenging to do that in another modality, either telephonic or video conferencing. And we just all experience that. Me as a professor, we had to go Zoom, and I had to teach work with my class on Zoom, and it's like, oh, okay, because there was a difference. I don't know if students can, of course, students even now they're looking at studies. What are the impacts of the educational academic success of students who've gone through this COVID, and it's showing that it doesn't look good, that students haven't learned or that they're not where they need to be, and they're wondering, and it's not anybody's fault. We were expected to enter this new world unexpectedly, and some of us aren't trained. It takes me a while to learn these different techniques and different strategies that maybe a younger professor can, oh wow, yeah, I've done that. And so what does that do? That translates back to the consumer or the person that you're serving. And so when we did that with these individuals, because we had focus groups, clearly the face-to-face translation had much higher effects in outcomes and compliance, right? Because Latinos tend to, we respect authority, and if we don't understand, we will say, yes, okay. So the non-Latino provider will say, oh, they're nodding, affirmation, so that's a good thing, we got there. And then they're like, esta está bien loca, I'm gonna go ahead and do what I want to do. She's crazy, she don't know what she's talking about, I'm gonna continue to use the teas that Abuelita's been giving me, okay? So those are the challenges that, how do you engage or develop that therapeutic alliance? I think that's so important. Mental health problems can be hard to identify because people will often focus on physical symptoms and not psychiatric symptoms. And so that's why I think that, again, that personalismo, which is part of our value system, that connectedness is so important. And I'm not saying it can't happen in these other modalities, it's just gonna take some time to get there. How to do that engaging using non-face-to-face interventions. So how does Lucas County compare? So this is the study, and I didn't have enough copies. I placed one report on the tables for you all to to refer to. Gonna check with my time. I do want to give you, again, purposeful disclosure, I do want to give you an example personally of why I think that it's so important for a healthcare provider, a mental health provider, to be understanding of when they're working with people of other cultures. Not necessarily that you have to know everything, because clearly this hour and a half and then later on with the other experts, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm 100% competent. Number one, I want you to lead with cultural humility to understand and be humble, and that it's a continual process of learning about others. So I would say about 2008, we had a health scare in my family system. My father was having issues medically, and they were looking at colorectal cancer as part of what was going on with him physically. Come to find out, he was having these issues, and being a very proud Latino male, he didn't want to talk about those issues. And I think this is prevalent in African American males as well, that getting screened for colon cancer is a stigma. So, of course, we had to go into he had the pre-screenings done, and then we were going to go meet with the oncologist. And of course, it was all of us going to the doctor to support our father, and so they had to bring in more chairs, and they were very accommodating, the oncology staff and the nurses. And then the doctor comes in, and my father's sitting down, my mother's next to him, and my siblings and I are there. And if I could have taped this interaction in terms of what I do and why I do it and the importance of it, of course, being the person involved, it's hard, right? You're emotionally connected and all those things. The physician sits down, and my father has crucifix on, his crucifix is his favorite crucifix. He had a t-shirt with my nephew who had got killed in a car accident, and he had that on, and so we're sitting there, and the physician's like engaging, tell me about that shirt, what is that about? And he starts talking to him about that, and and then he says, well, I worked in California, so I know un poquito de Spanish, etc. So it was very engaging, very, and I could see, now looking back at it, I could see my dad just kind of like relax. My mother relaxed in response to his not being as tense. And so he continued to engage with him and connect with them. And then he went into the diagnosis, stage 4 colorectal cancer. But he prepared my dad for that news. He prepared us for that news. Because my dad established that relationship with him. Now, this is what we're going to do together. These are the interventions. In our society, especially in Western culture, we have this, I need to know. So there's other people that tell me, doctor, what's my diagnosis, right? I think that's a cultural difference. Some of us are count measure, we want to know, but there's other cultures that, you don't want to know, or they're not ready. And that's called, working and starting where the client is, right? And so that was an example. Clearly at that time I didn't realize it and I wasn't able to process it, but that was a really good example of why a cultural intervention, cultural humility and understanding and recognizing the person. So don't think that you do it, you may not see that part, right, as a clinician. Maybe if you're working with a client long term you might, but you're doing the right thing when you approach it and that. And you may not see the results of it, but it's there. So, as Scott mentioned earlier, we were involved in doing this study with the fact that Adelante was no longer providing services in the community. We were hearing that the Hispanic community was not being served. They were like sheep without a shepherd. Everybody was all over the place. And so the mental health board contracted with me to do this assessment with key stakeholders. So this wasn't with clients, it was with key community leaders. So of the 29 people who participated in the survey, 25% or 86% were Latino or Hispanic, and we had 2 African American individuals and 2 white individuals. The roles in the community, so there was advocates, there was administrators, and there were social workers and we also had spiritual leaders that were involved, and legal advocates. Go ahead. These are the types of organizations that these 29 people worked in. They were in social services, legal aid, education, faith-based. 80% of these individuals had 11 or more years of experience working with the Hispanic community. So that's a lot of experience, a lot of years. And they predominantly served, 83% served all of Lucas County. There was a couple agencies that were specific in working with the 43609 area code, zip code, I'm sorry, that's just a typo, and then 43605. So we looked at prevention, because prevention is so important, as we talked about today. How do we do early identification, education, etc.? I asked these, Arturo and I asked these individuals to rate the education and screening prevention services provided to Hispanics here in Lucas County. 85% rated the education screening as fair and poor. So that's pretty alarming. Only 4 individuals rated the services as good. In terms of risk reduction, 89% rated risk reduction as fair to poor. So clearly there's some concerns here, right? Because this is an area that is supposed to be able to identify, to provide support and education. Health promotion, right? We use prometoras, we use all those things to educate, etc. Well, it's sad that over 80% rated health promotion as less than good. Cultural linguistic sensitive prevention services. So how culturally sensitive and how were people being able to be served in Spanish? 93% rated culture and language as less than good. So clearly some work that needs to be done here. And again, these are the perceptions, but again, these are the people that are working within the community, so they should be well informed about what's going on. So I looked at aggregating the education, screening, risk reduction, health promotion, cultural linguistics. 58% rated the 4 domains as poor, and only 12% rated the domains as good. I asked a question overall, how would you rate the prevention services? 93% gave an overall rating of prevention services as less than good. So then I asked them, well, what recommendations would you give to improve these areas? Outreach came as number 1, resources came as number 2, cultural linguistic competence came in 3rd, accountability and evidence-based practices were 4th, and trauma-focused interventions came in as well. So I think what was interesting about this, because those are appropriate, I think that the community also wanted to make sure that we had evidence-based interventions. Not just go out and do good and feel good and be friendly social workers, that we were going to do those things, but they were going to be based on evidence-based practices. These are some of the comments. I'll just read one. I don't want to take away from the services some people are already doing. For example, some schools are doing prevention care already, but we need more intentional about specific prevention like mental health. Right now it seems so general. So this is related to outreach. Go ahead. Work resources and workforce. Workforce development task force needs to feed more Latinos into mental health and AOD professions. So when I presented this information to the board, you're going to see this throughout the study. It isn't up to the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board to do it all. It's a systemic issue that involves collaboration with all different kinds of agencies, especially the universities. Because the universities are responsible for providing a pipeline of bilingual professionals that can work with this community. Again, services must be measured for outcomes, and I mentioned that already. That yes, we need these services. Yes, we need them in Spanish. They need to be culturally appropriate, but they must be good. They must have evidence-based practices. Right now, it seems like prevention is addressed as if someone else's problem. However, we need to address it as: do you know anyone? Do you or anyone you know have the following problems, and list them out? It can be helpful in getting people interested in seeking treatment. Again, that outreach. In prevention services particularly, it involves working with multiple organizations, right? You need to be able to be networking with schools, you need to be networking with healthcare providers, you need to be networking with other agencies that are going to be working with the target population. These are these individuals' responses that almost 3/4 of the respondents indicated there was no collaboration with other agencies. So, we social workers and counselors were trained in systemic and person and environment and looking at different things. Well, clearly here the perception was by the stakeholders that this was not happening. They gave an example of good collaboration where Adelante was working with aftercare school programs, so that was good. But then there was also again, these are teachable moments. What can we learn from this? And this is why it was important for the board to hear this information. But another respondent said that Adelante's outreach was targeted to a small portion of the community. Other Latinx members were not outreach. No engagement outside the same network that led to the same population being served. So again, this one was that, yes, it's good that you're serving South Toledo, the 43609, but there's Latinos in East Toledo, there's Latinos in the West Side, and they need to be targeted to serve all the different communities, not just this community. Now again, this is just a point in time of what the respondent saw, because it could be that Adelante was challenged with resources, they were challenged with staffing issues, but we need to learn from this in terms of that we need to target more than just a particular catchment area. So accountability came out as a theme. Cultural and linguistic appropriate services came out as a theme. The need for outreach also came out as an important area. Funding and workforce needs came out, and collaboration was also a theme based on all. So I took all the narratives and put them under a heading, and it came up with these 5 different themes that are listed. Again, figuring out how services can come to community versus the community going out to find these services in terms of accountability. Need to develop a pipeline to get more credentialed post-high school professionals that are bilingual and bicultural. The mental health board can't do that. That has to be a relationship with the academic institutions. Again, more broader services serving more than just South Toledo. Increased funding for more services for the Latino community. That maybe there was a capacity issue, so maybe they were working only in this area because that's all they could. They had the money to provide services for the 60 children. Again, more collaboration, some comments related to that. Mental health services. Over 75% respondents indicated that there's a lack of Spanish-speaking mental health professionals was a barrier to linking to mental health services. So we can educate people about all the things I've just been talking about the last hour, and we can encourage people, we can outreach to them, but once we outreach to them, if we don't have the persons to provide the services, then are we helping the community? Because if I say, okay, such and such speaks Spanish only, and I don't have any place to refer them, so they're going to be like, see, there they go. They're not helping our community. They just want our numbers for their levy. Other barriers, and so again, cultural competence. Why is it important? What engaging strategies are for Latino people to talk about mental health? Cultural competence, so someone who's culturally competent. Spanish speaking was important. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go through this because I know I'm coming up to the lunch hour. And these are some comments that people had on mental health. Provide more Spanish-speaking clinicians. And again, I can't just say, okay, you're a clinician, you're a clinician, you're a clinician, you're a clinician. It's going to take 4 years of undergraduate work and then 2 more years potentially for your master's. So this is going to take some time. But if we don't begin to strategize now, then we're going to be 6 years down the road with the same situation. So again, that's the collaboration between the institutions, different institutions, and to not rest solely on the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board. Substance use services, again, that's an area that is impacts the Latino community. All respondents indicated that there's a lack of Spanish-speaking staff to provide substance use services. Transportation was a barrier in getting people to get to services. Lack of insurance and residency status was an issue. And then once they get connected, they said the services were poor. The quality of services probably was related to the lack of bicultural staff once they got there. 66 of the respondents could not identify. So these are people that had over 11 years of experience, could not identify a bilingual speaking mental health or substance abuse or substance use clinician.
Since you mentioned that you would have to grow these professionals, I don't know the answer, but does the University of Toledo or Bowling Green or any of the, do we have any scholarships, any projects? Is the mental health board, are they in the house? Are they still in the house? Okay, well, let's just put it out there. Is the mental health board willing to put some dollars into scholarships to grow these bachelor's and master's level people, or other programs in the room?
Sadly, no. But, you know, it's interesting, I say that tongue in cheek, that no, the answer is I think there needs to be. But it's interesting that universities are struggling with enrollment. These providers are struggling with getting bilingual clinicians. I don't have my PhD, but it doesn't take a PhD to connect the dots. That they should be partnering with each other to deal with the problem at hand. Is doing that. Okay, hey, University of Toledo, mental health board could say, you know what, we will match a scholarship. If you provide free tuition, we'll pay for blank. You know, partnership, right? I think that's what you're referring to, right?
Exactly. And this is the last thing I'll say, and I'm not going to say anything more, but that's not true. We know. But for now, I'll say, okay, but, you know, is there a possibility, I'm just brainstorming, of bringing a course, a class, a first initial class, a writing course, introduction to social work course or whatever, to the community to have people comfortable to come to classes and maybe connect them this way? I would join you in something like that.
Yeah, I think that those are wonderful things, and I think that this is a venue to begin. I think there needs to be another kind of roundtable like this, where we can bring people together to take on this challenge of what are we going to do for the future of Lucas County in terms of its well-being, and ensuring that all community members feel that they have access to equity of mental health and healthcare services.
try to make it as short as possible. To go off of what she's saying, my bad. Thank you. Too much. Awesome. But what's it called? I was a Latina. I went to University of Toledo, and I'm a rec therapist. I almost did not graduate because of the lack of cultural understanding that I'm basically the second mom in my family. And when I had to go through a whole thing, because my degree is a 4-year degree, and if you miss a class or if you're late more than 10 minutes, you're minus 10 points. If you're late more than 10 minutes twice, that's automatic C. In my degree field, and a lot of the times in health-related profession degrees, you get a C. That's a fail. That's a fail for the class. And so when I explained, because I was late twice, when I explained I'm the second mom in my family, my mom can't lose her job. She has 7 kids to provide for. I can't leave the house, or I got to drop off my sibling to school. Like, yes, I'm late, but that's why. And it's not because of my grades. I got A's, I got B's. They basically ended up holding me back a year, which caused me to almost want to not even finish it. So I think, and I also served on the Latino Student Union board, where I had to go to meetings about Latinos at the University of Toledo. I'm only speaking about Toledo. And we had Latinos there. We got them there, but it was keeping them there. And I think part of it is just being understanding of the culture. We have financial issues sometimes. Family is important to us. So sometimes we are the second parent, or sometimes we have other responsibilities that I think need to be more understood by faculty. So I think a big part of the issue is like getting faculty in every single area to understand different cultural competencies.
Thank you for sharing your story. And I think that's a perfect example of, it's all ice cream, different flavors. If we can bring them in, like I mentioned, you can bring the Latino for mental health services, but if the agency is not culturally sensitive or linguistically ready, then you're failing the system. Similar to this academic situation, if you're bringing Latinos and Latinas into the University of Toledo, BG, whatever, and the faculty is not culturally sensitive in responding to their issues, then you're going to lose the students. So I think that those are the same things that I'm talking about here are the things that, you all clinicians are here. Too bad they don't have them for faculty, that they have to come to some DEU training that involves them sitting and listening to the stories and saying, okay, let's say I did it. Well, Louis, why did you do, tell me what's up here. It's kind of cognitive dissonance for me because I wouldn't do it, but why would you approach this? Why wasn't there another solution? And it's sad that you had the strength to stay there one more year, but not all students have that financial ability, family responsibility to be able to do that. So good for you, and hold us accountable. Yes, sir.
Thank you. It breaks my heart to hear that story that you just said. I'm from University of Toledo myself, but I've been working very closely with Louis, and he's my partner in change. And from the beginning, we're beginning, as I mentioned to him, to hold dialogues among Latina students at university, and we're focusing on cultural competency and better understanding where students are coming from, so that those kinds of experiences that you had don't ever happen again, because those are heartbreaking experiences to hear, and I feel very badly and regretful that you had to go through that. What we're trying to do, working again in partnership with Dr. Guardiola and across the university, is train cultural competency into our instructors so that they understand. And it's not just Latina students who are coming. We have more and more parents who are working full-time and who are occasionally late to their classes and are penalized for that too. So we have to be more cognizant, and we have to really respond to who our customers are, who are our students, who are coming to us with tremendous amount of I would say sometimes being overwhelmed with their life, and we have to be able to respond to that and allow them to move forward, get their degree successfully, and move on. So just wanted to respond to that. I'm sorry that that happened, and we are working very hard to change that dynamic.
Thank you. Yes, we are partnering. We have work to do, because I think it is important, the diversity of having students to be able to talk about their stories for the majority students to hear. Because especially in health and human services, and this is one of the reasons why I took on the role as assistant dean. However, I'm not sure I have a lot of teeth, but took on the role we are a college that provides services to people. And if we can, as a college, do better than what this story was about, then we have no business churning out students to graduate in the degrees that they're going to work with people when they're going to do damage to people that look like me, that people that look like you. And we have to be accountable to that. And I think that that's one of the things that my dean is working with me on, to work with the faculty, but there's a lot of institutional challenges.
Being indigenous and using the analysis we've done since Reagan's administration, now the state of Ohio being the hidden heroes and identifying why we were losing 22 veterans. If you don't wake up and see why 151 kids are killing themselves every day because of this care. We already took down the Health and Human Services in Texas. And for that to continue going that way, these are American children. That little boy was put on Ritalin because he was labeled ADD in Uvalde, Texas. And we have a campaign because we have an administration that stood down because of that policy. We continue looking away from this. We're bringing our nation to where we have our first responders' lives in danger. And why the little boy got out, killed his mother, and dragged her to the drain, poured gas on her, burned her because of his mental health issue. That's the truth.
Yeah, I think that our interventions can lead to so many different unfortunate situations, and we need to do better as a society in terms of trying to ensure the well-being.
I was just thinking about, I think that maybe if you could in your course development include Spanish language as like a minor in your field. In some communities, I've seen like where they mandated a minor in water, for instance, and then down the road they had all of these professionals in various fields that were able to then grow the water industry in that community. And I think if we've seen this lack of Spanish-speaking or bicultural mental health professionals for decades, that we could include perhaps Spanish languages courses as a minor in the field.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea, and I think that one thing that was going through my head, and I think I don't know who is going to take the lead for this, but I think this discussion needs to continue in a more macro level, and I think that because one of the things that we talked about is what Dr. Williamson said is the partnership, but it doesn't have to be scholarships for minority people. It could be scholarships like for Latinos that speak Spanish, but it can be scholarships for someone who wants to go to school to learn Spanish and do a dual degree, and that can help offset that expense, so that we're turning this pipeline of people that can speak Spanish and get into the workforce. So I think that's one area that we can work. So good idea. We'll have to put you on a committee. Isn't that how the Eurocentric world works? Committee, yes.
Thank you, Luis. So part of what I'm hearing is, there needs to be a comprehensive approach to addressing this issue. For example, in one category, here in Toledo, you have recently where Toledo public school system was graded. How accurate it is, I don't know, but in terms of graduation rate, you saw where it was 1 star out of 5. So to me, historically and unfortunately, Latino and Latino students within the Toledo public school system, in school we had about 15 years ago, we had about 80% in-school dropout rate. And then out-of-school dropout rate was about 80%. So we're really not we have a pipeline to drop out within the Toledo public school system. This is not to point fingers, shame, or blame. This is about a comprehensive approach that we need to talk about as well, and how do we change the trajectory of that huge problem, because if we're not graduating our students, then the pathway to get them to a post-secondary education where they're getting the education and the training they need to be in these areas that we're talking about where the barriers are at, we're not going to get there. And then when I looked at the statistics of the Latino population in the other counties, my gut feeling tells me is that many of them are probably dealing with the same issue. So one of the things that I'm working on is creating a team, like what you're talking about, a committee, but a team of people that will sit down and work with Toledo Public School System to talk about building a track or a pathway, short-term, middle-term, long-term, so that we can start making sure that our students are graduating and feeding them into the universities, Bowling Green, UT, but not a shame and blame. It's about, look, TPS, look, you turn around, look at the community, look, familias. We've got to get together, and all the support systems that exist need to be part of that change that somebody mentioned. Because if we don't incorporate that, like you were saying earlier, 5 years, you'll come back, Luis, and you'll be saying, gee, wow, man, you know, we're still dealing with this issue, these barriers. So now is a good time to start creating that pathway to start addressing that. So I would love for you to be a part of that committee to help us to make sure that we are addressing that issue in an incremental way, to make sure that we are feeding and getting folks in those areas. We have cultural competency, you know, centralized services in neighborhoods, you know, Latinos, Latinas, LGBTQ communities, because in those school systems, you have all of those issues that we're talking about that we need to deal with, and not just with the students, but from the families that they're coming from, and bridging all those gaps. So, gracias for your time.
Thank you. You know, I think that it is important to learn, and as if you looked at the clip that I did with the Channel 11, I said, you know, going back from when I was doing this in the 90s to now, there really hasn't been a lot of change. As I was coming in to do the taping 2 weeks ago, I got a call from an individual who said, my mother's depressed, we lost our brother, she's having a difficult time coping, do you know of a Spanish-speaking therapist? There was none. There are no Spanish-speaking therapists. And it hurt me to respond back. And as a therapist, I'm thinking in my head, well, maybe if I contract with one of the centers, and I could then provide that service to that person, but I can't be the one holding and doing all the work, because it's just not fair to me in terms of I can't put a Band-Aid on something, nor should I put a Band-Aid on something that needs stitches. And I think that is sad. It was very sad for me. And it was just so ironic that I was going to do the interview on this particular topic. So there are people, I want to put a voice to that situation so you all hear that there is a mother out there, a Latina mother, who's in pain, who's wounded because she lost her son, and the system cannot provide the intervention that she needs. Take one. Yeah, it isn't acceptable, because can you imagine any of you having that you would not be able to seek intervention? We're lucky that we can do that we can go and see a therapist and talk about our loss, our grief, you know. But equity, it should be everybody should have that opportunity to have that here. Yes.
Real quick on what he had referenced to in 2009, we had come together in Austin, Texas, and were initiated at the University of Texas in Austin for the Latino male being the #1 dropout in Texas. And we today have celebrated our 11th anniversary as Project Males. That data that's needed here to steer these stakeholders, what we did with the Casey Foundation on the juvenile detention alternative initiative, it showed Ohio #2 in recidivism for their mental health issue. That should be in the forefront as far as what it was it showed on that dropout rate we initiated in 2009 in Austin. Go online, Project Males is there for that Latino dropout, exactly what he said. To bring that model here, it became President Obama's Our Brothers Keepers initiative. That came from the work we did when we went after the school to prison pipeline, the Texas Appleseed.
It isn't just a Lucas County issue. It isn't just an Ohio issue. It is a national issue. Statistics showing that there is a lack of bilingual, bicultural mental health professionals, behavioral health professionals in the system. But we've got to take care of our own backyard here and figure out what we're going to do so that we could maybe be models of how this can be taken across to other areas. Yes.
Hey, sorry, I had an idea at first that I thought was kind of a little too far off the weeds, but actually, when you guys are coming around to what I was thinking is a potential idea to overcome another barrier might be help to professionals. Is would there be programs put in place to teach, people that are professionals that have already been in the field, been for a while in the field, to teach them Spanish?
Yeah, I think that's kind of an offshoot of Dr. Williamson's comment about how we can provide some money to be able to do these interesting takes, in terms of people learning Spanish as a second language to help feed that gap, or how we can train paraprofessional people to be appropriate translators, interpreters.
I learned French in high school in the first semester of undergrad, but unless I learn Spanish, it's not going to do me much good. So,
Great discussion, great insights. Yes?
I have a question here, which is aligned with what we're talking about. My question is, to what extent there is an interest of young generation to join the social work field or the mental health? Because I'm saying that because from the MENA region community, I don't find an interest to go to that field. Maybe because most of the families who's here, they want to better their life, they want to go to profession that pay best, or they want to go to another field that is still, they want to go to the mental illness.
Right.
It's too much trouble for their kids.
Right.
To dealing with the stigma, you're not gonna make them alive, you're gonna be troubled in the long run, involving in people troubles and all of that. So my question related to the community, the Latino community, to what extent there is an interest? Because in my community, there is.
Right. I think the answer to that question is, I think what was mentioned earlier is that we can't have a workforce ready if we're not getting them through the high school graduation and getting them. There's been studies on that Latinos tend to stay within their community, so you see higher level of Latinos in community colleges. So more partnerships between the University of Toledo maybe and Bowling Green with two-year community colleges that have a higher representation of diversity to get them hooked in. I think that social work in particular, I can speak to that because I'm a social worker. I mean, we don't have a good rap in terms of our community perception. We take away children and blah, blah, blah. So I think that's why I tell my students to get involved in boards and think different things so that we can have the other face of what social work looks like, so that we can encourage more participation and interest in people going on and getting. I wanted to be an attorney because that's what, I don't know where I got that idea, but I wanted to be an attorney, not any issues with attorneys, but I think that was where my advocacy role, my so forth came from. I was first generation, I didn't know, I was like floundering around. I think that's another thing universities need to do a better job with, is hooking and mentoring students of color or other marginalized groups to get them, keep them on track so that we have a better understanding of what they're dealing with. I think one more question, we have to wrap. I'm gonna put up, there's some tips that I have for folks about how to intervene with people of diversity. And so I'll just kind of be changing them up so you can just read as you're eating, you know, because I want to leave you with something you can take away. And I got too wordy or whatever, but I'll do that. Yeah.
So I think one of the things is that we push our community to go into these certain kinds of jobs, but we don't focus in on the social work and the mental health. And really talking to our kids now about everything that's happened with COVID and how the money is going in that direction. And that if they are fluent in Spanish, that they need to seek that type of profession because that type of profession is going to have the money and have the jobs. So before, when I had people who talked to me about what they wanted to do for their career and they told me they wanted to go to social work, I was like, don't do that. There's no money in it. You're going to have to do all these other things. But now, if they're fluent in Spanish, I'm telling them, this is the career you want to push, that you really want to go into. It's very interesting. There's going to be a lot of money that goes into it. But if we're not talking to the community about it, they don't know. They're going to think, oh, I should be a nurse. Oh, I should be an engineer. Because those are the careers that we try and push them to, especially with STEM and things like that. So we're pushing them into those careers instead of looking at the mental health and mental wellness.
Good point, very good point. And for my colleagues to remind me, because as I get older, my brain, we should have an our advisory board should maybe consist of non-professionals so that we can hear from them. So folks, like Elena, other folks that might be interested in being our advisory board. Just a thought, just hit me. I could be totally off kilter. But anyway, thank you so much.
Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I learned so much. It's kind of shocking, especially for me being an African American woman, to hear that another culture deals with some of the same things we deal with by skin color. So Louis, thank you so much for, mind blowing. I love it. I've never heard you speak before, so thank you so much. I think we should give Louis another round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention. We're going to provide a little bit of entertainment while you finish up your meal. The name of our group is El Corazón de México, which means the heart of Mexico, and we do dances from the various states of Mexico. Mexico is just like the United States. It's made up of states, and each state has its own style of music, its own style of dance, and its own style of costume. We're going to show you two dances today from the state of Jalisco, which is the state that most people think of when they think of Mexican folkloric dance. And we're going to have our dancers come out and perform for you. ladies and gentlemen, we are El Corazón de Mexico, the heart of Mexico. We would love to invite all of you to a special performance that we're going to have at Lourdes University on November 1st, celebrating Dia de los Muertos. It's at 7 o'clock and it is free. If you'd like to know more information about the group, you can find us on Facebook or you can look us up on our website, www.elcorazondemexicodance.com. Also, too, I'm going to stay around for a little bit, so if you want to ask some questions later on, that'd be great too. Thank you for inviting us here today and letting us share our culture with you. Thank you. So the first panelist is Rosario Sanchez, and she is from Grace Haven. She is a dedicated human trafficking researcher. Her initial article, The Hard Truth About Human Trafficking in 2014, provided the platform for her program of research and has directed her indefatigable efforts to bring human trafficking awareness and education to all service providers. So I'm not going to read the entire bio you have here because we only have 1 hour, and I think there's a lot of really good content for all of these speakers. Oh, I thought there was a question already. So we'll keep going. Noticeable by her several peer-reviewed journal articles and book chapter publications, the creation of the elopement maze model, podcasts, and social media interviews, and presenting at national and international conferences as an expert on human trafficking. So thank you, Dr. Sanchez. All right, Dr. Hinojosa from Northwest Ohio Psychiatric Hospital could not join us today, so we'll carry on with the other 2 panelists. The next is Giselle Mendoza McDonald, who works at the Lucas County Treasurer's Office. Giselle is a consultant for Brittany Ford LLC. She has over 15 years of nonprofit and government professional experience, including that as Director of Operations for the Treasurer's Office in Lucas County, Ohio, and Executive Director for Adelante Latino Resource Center in Toledo, Ohio. Giselle is a Latinx leader in her community, serving as the president of the Latino Alliance of Northwest Ohio, co-chair of the Welcome Toledo initiative, and in 2018 she was appointed by Governor Kasich to the State of Ohio New Americans Advisory Committee, and she is an immigrant from Nicaragua. All right, so please read the rest of her bio. Our last one is Mr. Arturo Ordonez. He earned his MSW from the University of Toledo in June 2020. He joined the staff of Equitas Health the same month as a health advocate and works with clients who have HIV. While attending the University of Toledo, he participated in various research projects related to substance use and healthcare disparities within the Latinx community. Mr. Ordonez has also worked with NAMI in the past to organize and lead the planning of the Latino Mental Health Forum. Most recently, he was involved in assessing the perceptions of community leaders as to substance abuse, behavioral, and preventative services provided by the Lucas County Latino community. So with all 3 of you, can you please just talk briefly before we get into questions about what got you into your activism and what got you into this field, and then just anything else that's maybe not listed in the bio. Go ahead, Arturo. You're closest.
Hello? Alright. So, just to know the nervous, this is like my second time speaking in public. So, I appreciate NAMI for inviting me to be a part of this forum. It's very important. And thank you, everybody here today for supporting. I guess, so like the bio said a little, I graduated with my MSW in 2020. But I guess what got me interested in the field, I guess, since I was like 9 years old, I remember, well, my sister and I were born in Mexico. I have 2 younger sisters that were born in the U.S. But since I was 9, 10 years old, early grade, so I remember always having to translate, interpret for my parents. Medical things, when it comes to housing situations, if you can just imagine how stressful and complicated that can be for somebody who can barely speak English and understand, because English is my second language. So it was definitely an eye-opener. I mean, it's crazy that kids are still doing that now for their parents. But so definitely that was something that's always been in the back of my head. I did work at Adelante in 2014. Giselle's actually the one that hired me. So thank you for, she was part of also the reason why I got into the field. I was working with the Los Niños program, like an after school program, with K through 6th grade students, doing AOD, after school program, etc. And then I know that I wanted to go back to school, but obviously with a lot of, I feel like minorities especially, the way it costs, financial, was my biggest barrier. I had gone an undergrad to University of Toledo. I got my bachelor's in business and marketing. Thankfully, I got through that. I was valedictorian in high school, so that got me to my way to like a 4 ride. But I knew that grad school would not be an option unless I got assistance. I did apply for the Office of Multicultural Student Success graduate assistantship. And the program would have been 2 years for my MSW, but I ended up taking 4 because I couldn't afford grad school besides the graduate assistantship, which is only like a certain credit hours a semester. So, and even now, and I graduated in 2020, I started working at Equitas Health with clients that are HIV positive. And even throughout my whole career in undergrad, with all my different internships, I did OMSS, I worked at a recovery center, ProMedica's SDOH. You see just like the lack of bilingual professionals. And even now that I'm graduated, it's a lot of pressure being a Spanish-speaking social work professional, and they expect me to be, like Lily said earlier, like the one person that can sort of help here and there everywhere. So it's a lot of pressure, and hopefully we shared some good ideas today on how we could possibly fill that gap with partnering with colleges, universities, and mental health agencies, etc. So sorry I rambled on, but yeah, thank you.
I'm Rosario Sanchez. So I am a forensic nurse, and my program of research is human trafficking. I did my PhD where I looked at the exiting process of adult survivors of sex trafficking during adolescence. And with that research, I learned a lot about the barriers that were there, and some of them were also mental health. My population that I looked at, one of them was multiracial, which means it could be, she had different kind of ethnic backgrounds. What drives me in my research and the work that I do is really my grounded social justice. This is a crime that takes away the humanity of a person and tells them that you're no longer human, but you are a commodity and I will sell you. And that creates a complex trauma on any victim of human trafficking. And in addition to that, there's prior history that we don't look at, and sometimes as providers, when we come across a human trafficking victim or survivor, we don't think of what happened before the trafficking. We only focus on what happened in the trafficking. But there's a Pandora box that happens to them. And if we are not able to help them with the mental health issues that happens to them early on, and some of them, or I must say most of them, have ACEs, and all of you know what the ACEs are. So if they have that and we don't deal with those issues, it continues on. Some of the findings that I had was that they didn't know that they were victims of human trafficking because of the prior history, because this is what their life was, and this is all they meant to be. So the other thing that drives me is my Latino background. And I know that there are Latino victims, but we don't see them. We don't identify them. And so what I have done is I just moved here about a year ago. I left New Jersey. In New Jersey, I was part of the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, and I developed a Spanish section for it. And we have a Spanish sections with the Spanish red flags and contact information, and I translated a PowerPoint presentation so it could be presented to Spanish community. I am doing the same thing here with the Lucas County Human Trafficking Coalition. I'm going to translate their PowerPoint
that we could go out in the community and speak to the community about what is human trafficking, because a lot of them don't know. They have no idea. And some of them are afraid. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of guilt behind this crime that we don't speak about. And then also there's the background of familiarismo, right? They have strong family ties. They have the strong family ties, but then also it's a negative thing because whatever happens in the home stays in the home. And that's why kids don't verbalize this crime. They don't say much. And there's also the other part of machismo, right? The male over male, they'll do whatever they want, and it's okay because they are the male gender, right? So there is a lot of misconception on that, and that the Spanish population needs to learn about that. They need to learn about human trafficking that is happening. And although we don't have real data, we do have some through the National Center for Human Trafficking, and there was a study done in the University of Cincinnati about Ohio. Still, we have estimates, because this is a hidden crime. People don't speak about it. It's not a pretty crime, and it's also very underground, profitable crime. It's about $150 billion that I'm making from selling a body over and over again. It's now moved to second place behind drugs. Because drugs you could sell it once, but a human body, you can sell it multiple times. And when you're done with that person, you can transfer it to another trafficker, and they'll sell them for different, either for domestic labor trafficking or for other purposes. So that is what drives me, and I know there is a huge connection with human trafficking and mental health. I know that there is a need for mental health providers, especially what Louis said, you know, there's not that many Latinas healthcare providers, and they need to understand the culture. We need to understand where they're coming from and be open and have empathy when we look at a victim or a survivor of human trafficking. So that is a little bit about myself.
Well, I'm glad you were here.
I've been here for a while. I changed my plates already.
My name is Giselle Mendoza McDonald. And the reason that I guess I'm driven to do these things and be here and advocate for folks, I used to have a saying that I wanted to be the voice for people that can't speak, and I kind of changed it to be the voice for people that are not ready, right? Because our job is to get them there so they can speak for themselves. And in order for us to do that is do these kinds of forums and continue to make connections in the community and open that door and opportunity for people that look like me and my family. As my bio says, I'm from Nicaragua, and I came here when I was 8, and it was a very traumatic time for me that I spent a lot of time not talking about it. I mean, decades, like, you know, you just kind of put it off. But in reality, there's a lot of folks that walk among us that have that history and that want to talk and connect to people that are just like you. And my history with my family is I was also the interpreter and translator and sometimes the driver, because everything was the maps, you know, when you grab MapQuest, it was like, turn here, and it was all, you know, in English and stuff. So I'm more than happy to be here and be part of the community. Like my bio says, I work for the Lucas County Treasurer's Office, and even in that office, as soon as I got there, I made sure that there was a lot of changes done for people that came in that spoke a different language, including by hiring myself and hiring another person that speaks Arabic. And we have ISP cards, and so when you come in to our office, you should, whoever you are, you should feel like questions can be answered. And I think that that is something that, as a community, as a culture, we just don't do that. I mean, if you can think like Arturo was saying, like even housing or even going to go get your driver's license, there isn't an openness and availability for people
here. I'm so proud of Arturo. He was talking about that it's people like Arturo, when you see the potential in folks and to speak, life into them and to keep encouraging them. I love that these two students who were on fall break are here, and I hope they take a lot from them, and that whatever they learn, they keep repeating as well as you guys. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to start asking some questions, and like I said, anyone feel free, and we will try to get you a mic. So I want to start with Rosario. Some of the residents, or some of the people that you are seeing, are they residents or are they undocumented? And are there any differences in how they come to you with less options and opportunities? And do they continue to seek therapy after uncovering some of the trauma?
How to stand out. Oh boy, okay. So the thing that we're seeing now, especially what's going on with the borders, right? We're having a lot of influx of immigrants coming in through the border. I belong to the Academy of Forensic Nursing, and we have a human trafficking task force there. And we are looking, and we have like a group of forensic nurses that work in different areas of the United States. Okay, go forward. When we talk about it, they tell me, especially the ones that are working in Texas, there is an increase of sexual assault cases in children and women and men. There are kids coming in with a 4x4 car saying, this is my family member, please connect me with them. Now, we don't know who they are. There's no accountability for these children that are coming in. So what that says to me is there are a lot of kids that are being trafficked, and this is like Candyland for a trafficker, right? They have these kids that have no family member, no safety, and what we know about kids, they trust, right? They think they don't have like that mentality of saying, danger, 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 right? They know if my mother says that's a friend, that is a friend that I'm going to. But then we are not, as long as we don't have accountability of them, we don't know what's going to happen to them once they arrive here. So a lot of the clients that I see are teenagers, 11 to 19, that were at high risk of sex trafficking, or they were sex trafficked. I work with them in the community. They identify more as multiracial, but then when they find out that I speak Spanish, they go, wait, my father is from Spanish descent. Do you speak it? Teach me. And I'm like, okay, here it is. There is a Latino, victim right here who was potentially a victim or could be a victim of it. So another things that and this is the thing, like family, what I say, familiarismo, we have very strong familiarismo within our families. We have a strong love for our kids, but then we also tell them, do not tell what happens at home, keep it quiet. So a lot of times, it takes a while before a child will trust you with things. Even an adult will trust you with things. What I see a lot is 6 to 8 weeks it takes for me to build trust, right? Because they're told you don't speak about those things. So there is a potential to see undocumented kids? Definitely yes. Is there like a number that I could tell you right off the bat that there is so many victims? No. Why? Because we only have estimates. But there was a study done that said 91% of them in 2019 from the University of Cincinnati, that said 91% are foreign nationals, which means that there could be a subpopulation of Latino kids, Latino women, Latino men that are being subjected to human trafficking. So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, the next one is for Giselle. Having been a provider in the community, what type of problems did you see when you would refer clients to other agencies where there wasn't Spanish-speaking people who could help them?
Loaded. Go for it. I said that's a loaded question. Honestly,
honestly, it's like when you refer someone, right? So we're there in the community as resource, right? So we connect. We're supposed to connect folks, and we make that connection, and we hope in the other line that someone is going to help them, just as you explain the problem and open a case, and that client becomes that other person's client. What we don't know is that that client stops there, and then they have to come back to you and say, well, I didn't get help, in fact. And sometimes that person may come back right away, or that person might come back months or a year later, and then you find out that this whole time you thought that person was being helped. So I think that we can do a better job of that, a full circle, like effort and resource to community, because as much as we try, we can't be everything for everybody. Just like Arturo said, sometimes when you get hired, like I get calls from all kinds of other languages just because I speak Spanish. I only speak Spanish. You know, so we can't be everything for everybody. And at the same time, the other person at the other line, I can't expect too much out of them. You know, if it's a person, you know, that's white, black, whatever it is, even a Latino person, it's only so much that they can do. And that's where that competency comes into play. And it's just not for, you know, non-Latinos or, you know, just for people of color. It's for everybody, because sometimes I always give the example of when I go buy a car, like everybody comes with me. So something as simple as buying a car and my dad has to test drive it, even though he's never gonna probably drive it, he still has to test drive it, and it's a brand new car and he still has to test drive it, right? So imagine going to the doctors, having a baby, getting your license, all those intimate things. You don't have another person on the other line. So there's a lot of barriers, and I think the main barrier is that we don't do a full circle to close the case, right, of that applicant or customer or client or consumer, however you want to say it. It just remains open because we never follow up. We never find out were they successful in their whatever they called about or whatever resource we were going to provide.
Thank you. So Arturo, being a current mental health provider, we know that a lot of providers out in the community, they have to use a 1-800 number or some agency that has a Spanish-speaking person. So presumably everybody here, they want to be involved and help people who are Spanish-speaking get connected, get resources, get therapy. If they aren't Spanish-speaking, how can they still demonstrate some cultural competency? What can they still do to help their clients, even though they're going to have to use an interpreting service? Like, what are some tools they can take away from today?
Well, just to clarify, we're not a mental health provider. I don't provide mental health services. I do more making sure that the client has financial assistance to pay for their HIV care, their medicines, their labs, housing, etc. Right now, at least thankfully, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say thankfully. I only have 3 Spanish-speaking clients, for example, in my agency, and they're all undocumented. I know that there's a lot more undocumented people out there with HIV, but they don't know about our services. But even, so thankfully, at least in my agency, and I think we have 500, I also mentioned to one of my professors, we have over 500 employees, and only 2 people and all the employees speak Spanish.
For something like visual, having something in Spanish, like your agency, your services in Spanish, 100%. Then you can run into the whole issue of a lot of undocumented people or people that speak Spanish might not read Spanish. So making sure that there's other forms of media. I feel like Spanish videos about your services, translated documents, being patient with them, like just time. You have to probably take a lot more time with this client than a normal client you would be spending time with. They can sense if you're sincere or not. People, and that's not just Latinos, but for like everybody. Like if somebody truly cares about you and wants to take the time to take care of you. try to go and, I know there's a lot of red tape in trying to provide services to some people. Try to find loopholes in the services you provide. I know sometimes your funding will require you to have certain documentation from a client. At least for us, we're pretty lucky that we can provide a lot of like verbal attestations if like we can't provide like where the client, like if a client doesn't have a Ohio ID or a bill, utility bill, we can thankfully provide like attestations like I verify that they live in the state of Ohio. So just having like more flexibility with somebody like that, having literature in Spanish or whatever language that the client speaks.
So if you remember, I said something about like the vocal link and the I speak cards, and those are some simple things. I mean, even if you Google what can you do and the I speak cards and things, but if you see a client and you're doing your application, this is something very simple that you could do starting tomorrow, today. In the application, if your client is filling out an application, is there a question that says what language? You know, what preferred language do you want to be spoken to? How do you want to get messages? So if someone is setting up an appointment and you're calling back to give instructions on how to get there or what they have to do, and it's all in English, you already failed that client. So when that client gets there, and you already know because they filled out all these forms that you requested them in English, and they said they speak Spanish, and then they get there and they're told, oh, we don't have an interpreter, or we don't have, you know, you already failed them again. So you keep failing this person again and again, and then you expect them to go through the door and trust you and believe that you want to help them and believe whatever else is happening. So I think as caregivers, or you know, whatever role you play to direct service, I think genuinely there's very easy things that you can do to get trust going for that person. And you know, looking at your agency, and imagine yourself as being a person that speaks another language. What can your agency do? And these are conversations that should be happening at your one-on-ones or your staff meetings about how we can do better. Continue to ask your clients for feedback. You know, as an organization, whether it's for profit or nonprofit, you want to do better. You want to excel at what you do, and in order to do that, you have to ask those questions that you may not like the answers to. But I mean, honestly, ask yourself, how many times have you done that at your agency or wherever you are currently working at?
Mm-hmm. I have a comment too. Also, you have to establish literacy. Can they read? Can they understand what they're saying? Sometimes some of the family members that are coming from other countries, for example, my mother only had primary education, nothing else. So you give her a form in Spanish, she couldn't be able to understand every single word that was on the form, but you took it for granted that she could read Spanish. So you have to really know where your clientele is coming from and who is the one that is really reading that form, because it could be the child too. Now, if this child doesn't know how to speak Spanish or doesn't know how to read, then how is that form being filled out?
And even for myself, relaying something about their HIV medical care over the phone is much different than in person. So a lot of times when our providers, our medical partners, UTMC for example, it's much better for me to just meet them at their medical appointments and explaining like the case management side of their care than over the phone. So like, I definitely do a lot more for that population than I do for any other client, and I feel like I have, like, not that I have to, but I feel like that's the only way that I'll be able to better help them.
Okay. You guys have mentioned some really good things about how to build trust. Can you expand on that? Let's say if you have undocumented patients or clients, they've already been traumatized by their experience getting to the United States. What are some ways that you can build trust with them? You guys are all Spanish speaking, you all are Spanish speaking. What if you're not Spanish speaking?
I go first. Ladies first. He's funny. Ladies first. Okay. One of the things that I always do when I teach forensic nurses when they're gonna come in contact with a victim of human trafficking, I tell them, leave your biases outside. Go in with an empty page. Meet the patient where they are in at this moment. Don't take it for granted what you heard from the ER doctor, from the social worker, from everybody else, from the law enforcement, because we work closely with law enforcement. Don't hear anything. Go as an empty page and listen. Listen to what the patient is telling you. And write it. Write it. But pay attention. Meet them at that moment, because that's what's going to make a difference in building trust with that patient. Because otherwise, if you go in and you have your biases, you already are asking questions that to them is like, she thinks I'm guilty. She thinks I wanted this. She thinks that, this is what is happening to me is my fault. The other thing I tell them, and I know a lot of you are going to say, what? We go in and say, it's not your fault. What is wrong with that statement? Can anybody tell me what's wrong with that statement when you go in and say it's not your fault?
They might not have known anything bad was happening to begin with, to establish fault.
That's right. They have no idea what has happened to them. They don't know anything about the crime. The other thing is, you don't know what they have done before. And at that point, when you say it's not your fault, you just close the door. I am not going to tell you what I have done. I'm not going to tell you what happened to me. Because you just told me it's not my fault. And if I tell you, for example, I had a survivor who told me, I left my daughter with a prostitute and locked her up in a car with her. I did that. But if you keep telling me it's not my fault, but I know deep inside of me what I have done, you just close the door for me to talk to you. I will not tell you what has happened to me. So rather than that, go with a trauma-informed care approach, saying, I know something happened, and this was a very bad event that happened to you. Can you please tell me more about what has happened so I can understand you? You're asking for permission, for them to trust you, for them to speak about the trauma that they have gone through. But we tend to go in like, okay, so you're here for what? What brings you here today, right? That's the first thing we say. What brings you here today? Rather than saying, can I get you something to drink? Are you comfortable? Are you warm? Tell me what's been going on in your life. Start from something broad and then go in, because that's how you build initial trust, communication with that patient, because then you're treating them like a human being. Remember, they don't know how to be a human being. They have lost that. But you're trying to tell them, listen, you could trust me. I'm here for you. And you don't have to tell me everything. But if whatever you could tell me that could help me reach you better, know you better, so that I could provide you with the services that you need, that is how you're going to open up the door for them to communicate with you.
I like that. I think and maybe I may be asking too much of folks here. I think you have to first start with yourself. Like, people without any language, right? Even spoken, when you come in the room, you can kind of feel the vibe, right? You can kind of tell how I'm feeling right now just from you sitting there. You haven't even really been near me. And folks that speak other language, they're more in tune to that. Your body language, the way you come in, or you drop your stuff, and like you said, what brings you in today? What can I do for you? And it's just routine, right? And there's nothing personal about that. So I always say to people that, because I'm really good about checking people with bad customer service, and I tell them, I'm being honest here, I tell them maybe you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. Or how I told a nurse, my mom had just had surgery, and the loudest people were the doctors and the nurses. And my mom had a headache. She hadn't ate in I don't know how long. And I said, I would hate to be a patient here. She doesn't know the language. She's disorientated.
She just woke up and there's yelling and screaming everywhere, right? So we make it uncomfortable from the beginning with us just being there. Imagine these vulnerable people coming in and asking for help who are undocumented, who technically they don't exist, right? The term that, which I hate, is they call them aliens, right? And so how can we as providers make it less invading and make it more personal and make it one-on-one? And it's like what you said, leave whatever you thought at the door, because in fairness, you're going to waste your time, you're going to waste their time, because you're not really there to help. You're there to just fill out an application and just write them down as another number, and it's not going to go nowhere, and it's going to be an open case, open application, and it's not going to come full circle. And as a provider, you should ask yourself and check yourself. I mean, sometimes I check my own self, like, maybe I should go outside and get some fresh air, because I am not doing a service to the community, especially taxpayers. They will tell you, I'm paying your salary, So you just really, I mean, we're human, right? We have to check those things at the door and are we there to be of service and do service and really help these folks out?
Everything they just said was fine. but no, I mean, at least for my clients, like, and I know you can't magically speak Spanish or hire somebody who speaks Spanish. That's not feasible for all agencies. But like something like visuals, like I said, have literature in Spanish. Make your offices comfortable. Like it could be a painting, or I mean something that the person can relate to. They feel comfortable with. Try to meet with them. Like for at least in my field with HIV care, we have the medical side, the case management side, the housing side. So just try to go out of your way. I mean, obviously you can't 100% devote your time to a client with a language barrier, but just go a little bit extra further steps if you can. HIV is, at least from on my side, it's a stigma, but it just meant Latinos already. I can guarantee it's 10 times worse. So I don't know what else I can put to that.
No, that's good. Those are all really good. You can keep the mic over there. Those are all good tools, because we want to be able to present to the people here who are patient-facing tools that they can take away. And what I think this forum has done a really good job of over the last, are we on our 7th year, Louis? Okay. 7th year is infusing things that are important to diverse communities for people who serve them. So I think, Louis, you talked a little bit about religion earlier, family, like there's this huge role of family with Latinos and Latinx communities. So can the three of you talk about that? Because I think that is not typical. We don't talk about that in clinical circles, that you talk about religion or honor religion, but that is important for people who are serving diverse communities. So can you address how religion has played a role in when you have provided service to patients, how family has played a role, and how the clinicians and patient-facing people could work that into their services?
So, I know within the social work field, I feel like 80% of my social workers that I've met are very non-religious people, at least in my experience. I am, so I have no problem incorporating that, but for somebody who is not religious, or I guess just meeting them, like somebody mentioned earlier, just try your best meeting them as where they're at. Talk about the benefits of using religion as a mental health service to them, the benefits of like just like a holistic way of everything. So I mean, so you don't have to stick with just religion, but definitely just meet with them where they're at and try to find the benefits of all things. Yeah, I mean, at least in my experience, my clients don't. I've never had to deal with that, but I don't know.
I can pass it to the others if you have had to use that.
So what I could tell you is, from my research, I found a big positive influence was spirituality
for the survivors. One of them would read the Bible in between her clients. She said she was placed in a motel and she found a Bible and she would read the Bible. And she would read about the women that were in the Bible. And that she could see herself in that. Another one spoke about the strength that she couldn't have survived without God being there. Somehow they found God. And the beauty, what I found with these survivors, that even though they had gone through the most horrible trauma, they wanted to help others. That is amazing in itself, that they were able to say, no, this happened to me, but I want to help others. And you see a lot of survivors of human trafficking speaking about what happened to their lived experience and opening up and telling you so that you could understand that population better. So spirituality, even in the Latino community, is very strong. Most of us are Catholics, and so we have that strong about the priests, about, the saints. So in that, it could be a positive thing when we are dealing with mental illness, right? Because it could provide them support in a different kind of way, through prayer, through meditation. Today, I tell you that with my kids that I work with, I ask for permission, can we do a devotional? And they all like, yes, I want to know God. Please pray for me. Like one day I went with a kid to the doctor, and she thought she was pregnant, and she goes, Miss Rose, please pray for me. Let's pray right now. Let's pray right now that it comes back negative. And I stood there, I held her hand, and I prayed with her, and she goes, I want to know more about God. And this was a multiracial person that had a Latino influence in her life. Her father was Hispanic. So there are positive things that we could build up a strength within the human trafficking, mental illness. And then family. Family is very strong in the Latino community. We are known for being very close together. We say we tira para adelante. We always go forward. We go forward together. But then also, like what I said, is like, we don't talk about things that are bad, because there is that shame that happens, right? Because if somebody has mental illness, well, what is wrong with you? Like, why are you depressed? Get over it, right? And that mentality is like that we don't seek out mental health. And I think that that is something that we could actually build the family unit. A lot of the times that who I work with, I build a child, but I also look at the family environment, because I know if that child has a strong safety family environment, that child will thrive. That child will see the positive things in her life. And so family is strong. And there's no shame. I often tell them, listen, what happened to you is bad. But trust me when I tell you that if you don't speak about it, you might think it's okay today, but tomorrow you might find yourself all of these things that you have kept inside coming up forward, and that might even prevent you from flourishing, because what I see in you is a thriving person. What I see in you is somebody going to college, a trade school, doing whatever they want. I see a mother, a sister flourishing. So those are the things that we build up, that we want them to get mental health. And a lot of the clients that I work with, I am a big proponent. I tell the families, we need to have mental health. After 6 to 8 weeks, when the child starts trusting, because that's how long it's going to take you to build trust with any client that you have. Nothing is going to happen overnight. They're going to be sensing how you react, your body language, how your face is, to things that they're going to give you little by little. And then you go, okay, now you're talking. Now let's put words to what happened to you, because you don't have them. Now let's go to therapy. Now we need to implement mental health therapy. And those kids are flourishing. Like every day I go home and I'm like, oh, thank God. Like we're doing good. We're moving forward. We're going para adelante.
For my experience in working in the social service, I think religion for a lot of the families was like top priority next to family, because to them that's really all they had. When they come here, they come with their immediate family, so the community becomes their family slowly. It might take some years. Recently, I saw a picture of one of Adelante children that was at homecoming, and in the picture, like, they had other Adelante like kids and their families, and so they created like a little family of their own, at Adelante, because of how they met and they went to the same church, they go to the same school, and they create this own community and culture. And I think when we forget that family and religion is important to our families, we kind of lose them because we're just there to talk about whatever. But whether you're a believer or not, there is, you can talk about a higher power, whatever that may be. And if they want to, just have a moment of silence, and you may not be praying, but they're praying, you are at least being sensitive to what they're going through or what they want to do. And to me, like, I'm a believer, and religion has changed for me as I gotten older. Family has changed as I gotten older, and I do have conversations that sometimes blood family may not remain your blood family. You have a new family, and breaking those generational curses about that uncle and that auntie or that, whatever, just because they are your family, you're not allowed to say anything, or you have to continue to talk to your abuser or whatever that may be. And I think those are some conversations I think that are, in my opinion, should be happening and talked about. So, for example, when I started publicly saying that I'm seeing a therapist, my family is like, why? Like, or people are always thinking like, that I have it together or should have it together and shouldn't be seeing a therapist because I have it together, or whatever thought they have, right? But I see a therapist and we talk about religion and faith, and I don't know if my therapist is a believer or not, because she doesn't share that, but I know that she cares about what I believe in. And I think as providers, right, we want to care about what they are using as an avenue, right? Whether it's meditation or prayer or church or whatever. And if we're not having those conversations, what else can we do to have those conversations?
Very good advice. Rosario, you touched on trauma-informed care a little bit when you were talking about your experiences. So who here has not had trauma-informed care teachings in some capacity? Who has not? So everybody has had trauma-informed care teachings. That's really good.
So you're all experts.
So at least we're all speaking the same language a little bit. So how can you infuse some trauma-informed teachings, maybe in the intake process, that first meeting with a client or a patient, for somebody who is a non-English speaking, somebody who has experienced so much trauma or even has come here undocumented? How can you infuse trauma-informed care in that initial process with them?
So trauma-informed care principles, all of you know that it starts with safety, right? You have to have, the first component of it is safety. And how do we provide safety when you're doing an initial intake? It's allowing them to be themselves at the point where they're in, telling them that this is a safe environment, that they could speak to you, that whatever it is that is going to be spoken is confidential, right? That nothing is going to come out. That is creating safety. Also providing them with the initial, what is it that you need? Like, tell me what you need. What resources can I provide you with? Because some of them might not come out and say, well, I need food, or I need a place to stay, or I need how to pay my bills, right? But if you start with that safety component, it just flows into trustworthiness, collaboration, mutuality, and then you provide them with a community, if you know a community, that has, like Adelante was one of them, an organization, you have provide peer support. Somebody that you know within the community, and that really is your job, right? To see what is out there in the community for your Latino community. What is out there? Is there an organization? Is there a parish? Is there a priest that they could talk to? Is there somebody that you could provide them with? And through that is also having cultural humility, right? Humbling yourself, because the thing with Spanish community, I come from South America. He comes from Mexico, and she comes from Central America. They're different things. We are the same, we are Latinos, but we have different things. We speak different dialects that sometimes we take it for granted that you understand me. That, you know, and then sometimes when I'm presented to the Latino community, I say, okay, this is how we say it in my country, but how do you say it in your country? And they're all like, oh, let me tell you what is that, you know? How do you call the traffic car, right? How do you call a pimp? What do you call them? And so it comes out to you having humility to say, look, I know this culture, like myself, I know that culture. You don't know the culture, but then you say, you know what, teach me. Let me understand from you, like what is it that I could understand all of that. But the first thing is provide safety. That's the big thing with trauma-informed, and ask for permission. Don't take it for granted just because you're a case manager or you're a social worker or like me, a forensic nurse. I'm gonna come in and tell you what to do and when to do it and how to do it. No, ask them, is it okay? Can you? May I? And that is gonna open up the doors, because that's one of the things we tend to forget with trauma-informed care principles. Yes, there are the 6 principles, but it starts first with permission. If you don't ask for permission from that patient, you better be sure that your trauma-informed care is not going through the right way. Oh, yeah.
Sort of, well, mine too, with HIV, you know, that's a type of trauma that the client is dealing with as well. At least with my clients, again, like she said, provide that safe space, educate, at least with my clients, that a lot of them don't know anybody that's had HIV in their family or their friends group, so just educate them about in this case it's HIV, but it could be any situation. At least me, I will educate them about HIV, the treatment plans that are available now. It's not the same thing that it was when it first came out. Just provide that cultural humility, like she said, and educate, and try to work with other departments or other agencies, collaborate to help them, because it's already hard to navigate your HIV care, and then imagine trying to get services in all different areas, whether it be mental health or your medical care, et cetera. So try to collaborate with other agencies to help the client better, because it could be overwhelming, whatever they're going through.
You already talked about trauma-informed care? You're good? All right, are there any questions from the audience? Go ahead.
William Barr did a Operation of Relentless Pursuit task force, and Cleveland just was awarded the grant on the human trafficking and slavery issue. And that showed, as far as those prostitution, sexual assaults during that pandemic, on the 700% increase out of the process, as far as those children in foster care. In a case we won back in 2015, that were children put on psychotropics in our foster care in Texas. Ohio was number 2. Do you have that data and resource?
I don't have that data, but I could look it up. And one of the things that you have to know about human trafficking is that it's divided into 2 types, sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Now, the sex trafficking part is that if you have to, for sex trafficking in an adult, you have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. But, no, I know. I'm sorry. Let me just tell them so that I could explain it. Right. Yes. Right. Right, the okay, let me go back to what I was saying, and then it will flow into what you're asking. So, under the age of 18, force, fraud, and coercion does not need to be proven. They are victims of sex trafficking. That answers your question, because these were kids that they are victims. They are not, okay, so this is where can be a prostitute. A child cannot be a prostitute. There shouldn't be the word prostitution. They are victims of sex trafficking.
They're victims.
They are victims of sex trafficking. So let me explain something to you. There is a lot of things and a lot of language that has been done with human trafficking in where we call kids prostituted kids, or kids that are in prostitution. I'm telling you right now, there is no such a thing. Those are victims of sex trafficking, because any kid under the age of 18 cannot be doing prostitution, okay? That is a victim of sex trafficking, and that is by federal law. So in this case where you're telling me that these kids are being prostituted, I'm telling you right now, they're victims of sex trafficking. And if they use other means, such as psychotropic drugs that they're using on the kids, to what? To what purpose? Right?
The national study on the proclamation Trump did to the trafficking slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
sorry.
Okay. So I kind of wanted to talk more about how we handle things with what Giselle was talking about, losing clients in the system. I am a business advisor, but what we noted was that we were losing clients in our system. We would send them off and we had no idea where they went. So I'm on a grant called the Community Navigator Program, and the whole point of me is that I have soft meetings with people. I hand them off. Like, I just met with someone from the Small Business Development Center. We're gonna start setting aside our Mondays. I'm gonna go meet with my clients with her on Monday to make sure that we aren't losing them. I know it's a lot to ask out of all of y'all, but if we start talking about things like that organizationally now, we can make those processes and procedures that we bring to the community and make sure we aren't losing those people.
All right, we are at the end of our panel. Is there any closing or departing words of wisdom that our panelists want to leave for our guests here today? Nothing? You guys have done a really wonderful job spreading. Thank you for helping build cultural competency for our attendees today. It's really appreciated. I think now I can hand it off to you, Sonia? All right.
Ignore my shoes, my feet were hurting, so. Give it up again for the panel. You guys did such an amazing job. Thank you so much. Thank you for being sensitive to the questions that were asked. I mean, this was a very difficult conversation to have, but it's very important, so thank you so much. I really don't have anything else to say. I'm gonna let Robin come up, who is Executive Director of NAMI, so let's give her a hand. Okay, is there any housekeeping? I know Sonia passed out some evaluations, so if you would please, fill those out, even if you're not going to be receiving CEUs. It helps us with our planning. It was so exciting to be back here in person for our 7th Latino Mental Health Forum, and I just want one more big round of applause and thank you to Louie and Rosario and Arturo and Giselle and Ursula and then one other thing I would like, if you're a member of the Latino Leadership Initiative Committee and you're here, could you stand up, please? Aaliyah, you too. I mean, because these folks give up their time, their treasure, their talent. We meet on a monthly basis to talk about how we can make this a better mental health experience for the Latino community. And NAMI is very committed to making sure that no one travels this mental health journey alone. And I don't care what color you are, what money you have, where you live. You know, we all have brains, and they deserve just as much attention and TLC and support, no matter who you are in our community. So, round of applause to the Latino Leadership Initiative Committee. And then finally, a big round of applause to Sonia Quinn, because honestly, this has been an amazing day. And she's done an outstanding job with the planning and making sure that we all had a great experience here today. I know I really enjoyed it, and I hope you all will come back next year.
And before you guys leave, we're going to open the floor just in case you have a few more questions. We just want to make sure that, you know, if you do, you feel free, because Louis is here and he's going to answer them. And just real quick, CEUs are available, and they will be sent to everyone that we have the correct email address for.
So we do have a couple minutes left. Is there any questions that you have that you'd like to ask?
Thanks, Louis. You're the perfect person to answer this, too. So one thing I didn't hear too much about in terms of mental health, and we know that mental health among lesbian, gay, trans, queer people is much higher than for everyone else. And I wonder if you could speak to stigmas and resistance and maybe even rates too within the Latino community around lesbian, gay, trans, and queer folks, Hispanic folks as well.
Great question. I think the answer is of course, when you have an intersectionality between representing two different marginalized groups, being a gay male, being a gay Latino male, has been a struggle in terms of, well, you know, I'm 61 years old, so clearly coming out, clearly discussing it with family was not easy, right? And I think that then makes the stressors much more higher, right? The depression, the isolation, but then you still have to maintain your role. I'm the oldest son that is responsible for certain things, and that some of the things that I identified with had to come in second to those things, and so that was a little bit stressful, right? Not being able to share, not being able to participate in family meetings, bringing partners, etc., or even disclosing that one had a partner. So I think that the answer to your question is yes. I think that Latina folks who represent those populations have a little harder in terms of their stressors and their ability to have their family system. I think it was Rosario that talked about, you know, families look differently. And so in those cases for Latinos, they had to connect with other folks that then became that compadre, comadre, godmother, godfather, that resource, that support system that wasn't blood. And I think that those things are, especially in therapy, you know, because you don't easily disclose those things. So as a clinician, you may miss that in a client that may not feel comfortable disclosing their identities fully. And so that makes it a little bit more challenging for the therapist, because you may be focusing on certain issues, but yet you're dancing around the real issue of the fact that they're having stress because they haven't really felt comfortable connecting with their families and they feel very isolative. Does that make sense? Anybody else want to add? I'm not, again, this is my humble opinions on things. Is there anybody here that wants to add? Yes.
From Brazil and then having to work with language barriers with Portuguese at all?
Great question. I think I haven't personally. I think one of the things that I found that was interesting is that I am a medical social worker and I do per diem work out of Cleveland. They initially reached out to me because they had, and this is interesting, so because you think Cleveland being a bigger metropolitan area, that they would have bilingual Spanish-speaking medical social workers. Well, they didn't, so they reached out to me in Fremont, Ohio, asking if I would come in and help with their Spanish-speaking families, predominantly Puerto Rican Um, so what I found myself working with is, clearly the Puerto Rican community has their own colloquialism, they have their different approaches in language, so that was a little challenging a bit. But the flip side was working with older adults who are Polish, who are from other countries that I needed to have an interpreter interpret for me for their language that I wasn't aware of. So it was kind of interesting for me because usually I'm the one that's speaking the other language. And so it kept me humble, right? Because I understand how it is to be a clinician not having the ability to speak directly in the language of the client system. But to be honest with you, I think I think Rosario or Giselle mentioned it, it's really being human, to being genuine, having unconditional positive regard, which is something we're taught as undergraduate social workers, right? Is connecting with that individual to develop that alliance that they would feel comfortable to share. And I think that goes with all populations, including LGBTQ individuals who maybe are more, depending on their level of acculturation, if they come from countries that really have persecuted them, that they can't even disclose, that they're going to have a little bit more of a difficulty becoming, having a trusting relationship with the clinician. So I think that those are, I haven't had someone from another country other than Nicaragua. I've had challenges when I worked for the Migrant Head Start program. I had challenges when I mentioned earlier there's indigenous Mexican individuals that live in Mexico that are and I can't think of the language they speak. There was one that was really popular, but it was an indigenous native language. So these kids would be the interpreters for their parents because the kids would speak that language and speak Spanish and then speak English. So it was really an interesting dynamic trying to work with, because you think Mexico, right? I think, oh, I'm Mexican, I can speak Espanol, right? No, but the parents spoke the other language, the indigenous native language. And then the children who were being taught English and Spanish in Head Start would be the ones that would provide the translation for the parents. So that was a little bit different, and that was a little bit challenging. So, you have a question? Right. Will I personally be involved? Well, I think those are wonderful questions. I think we're really at the foundation of trying to deal with some things that we're not ready to, like having people that are bilingual. We can't get into that higher level thing. Right now, this particular forum is looking at the importance of the clinicians who don't speak Spanish, how they can better work with. Right. And that may be another conference that we might have to have in the future to really focus on that particular theme. But yeah, and there may be, no, I'm sorry. I can't really speak on that. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So, I had a thought, not a question. So this was my thought. Like, after sitting through all of this, I personally, because I'm Latina, I'm Mexican American, I'm the first child born in America from my dad, and kind of just putting it all together after listening to all you guys, I realized, like that cultural humility. Like I have a lot of growing to do. Just because I'm Latina doesn't mean I can't grow, kind of thing. And that like all of us play a part, like no matter what our positions are here, whether you're a social worker, a rec therapist, a student, a leader in the community, we all can do something exactly where we're at. Whether it's like, do you know if you have a person come in and they don't speak your language or you can't speak their language, do you know the quickest way to get to how you can communicate with them so you can save time? So they're not becoming impatient or irritated. Do you know that? Do you know where that resource is in your facility? If not, get acquainted with that. Do you practice patience? Or like Giselle had mentioned, like sometimes checking yourself, like are you in the right mind to work with your patient, your client, whoever it is. Like all of us, no matter where we're at, can do something, and that would make a big difference, I think. So that was like the biggest thought that I took away from today, and I just wanted to share it.
Thank you for sharing that. That's great. I think that, again, being humble, treating people with respect, with dignity, how we would like to treat them, and have others treat our families, ourselves, working on biases that we might have. We all have them. Looking at those and educating ourselves and being open, I think is important as a clinician. And I think the most important piece is the client can be your best resource of information. Asking them the question, asking them what they think. Wanted to go through some 10 tips, but we'll get that at another forum, maybe the 8th annual. Someone else can bring it up, because, and where's Sonia? I ran into a potential speaker for next year. So thank you so much. I hope this is helpful, and have a great rest of your week. Have a great day.